What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto got a seductive scroll spirit pregnant? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Walking down the street at a steady if slightly sluggish pace was a blonde, spiky-haired mid-teen with his head down, unintentionally hiding his sky-blue eyes. He wore orange pants and a matching jacket with a black shirt underneath, and blue sandals that looked more like open-toed shoes. He walked alone on the side of the street he was on. The other people gave him a wide berth, as some gave him dirty looks or refused to even stare in his direction. That was pretty normal treatment for him for as long as he could remember. However, the blonde's mind was focused on a different subject. Steal the forbidden scroll, learn a jutsu, and I can finally become a ninja. Naruto Uzumaki was deep in thought over what one of his Konoha Ninja Academy teachers, Mizuki, informed him was another way to pass the exam needed to become a genin. He had failed that exam for the third time now, and was given a chance to still graduate, a chance he needed to take. The sooner he graduated, the sooner he became a shinobi, the sooner that happened, then his opportunity would soon come. The first time I get a mission beyond those gates will be the last time I need to go through them. Naruto was known by the masses to be a happy-go-lucky loudmouth that always declared he would become Hokage, but that was a lie. Naruto hated living with these people. He was tired of the cold stares, tired of being alone, and he was sick of pretending to be some idiot. Naruto knew that it was needed, however. These people saw him as some kind of threat, and while he had no idea why, it was better that he keep up the facade. Just until his first mission out of the village. Then he could start over somewhere that didn't despise him for just being alive. Which is why I had to. Naruto unconsciously had been going down the route he usually took back to his apartment in the red light district, but had hit someone when he made a turn, and fell flat on his ass. Great, now these villagers had an excuse to yell at him. Well now boy, you shouldn't be walking when so deep inside your mind. The voice of an older man told Naruto as the man held out his hand to the fallen blonde. Surprise showed on Naruto's face as he looked up to see the person who spoke to him. The man, while old, definitely had a good deal of strength in him if his posture was any indication. His shoulders were broad, his height imposing, and his eyes shined with both wisdom and experience. The man was dressed in all black, and possessed gray hair on his head and beard. When Naruto took the hand offered to him, the younger male felt a strong grip before he was effortlessly yanked back onto his feet. Naruto immediately switched his mask on. Thanks, old man. Naruto excitedly spoke with closed eyes and a grin. Think nothing of it, whatever you were thinking of before must have been quite important. The older man replied with a thin smile as looked down at Naruto. The man surprised Naruto even further when he continued to speak to him, completely ignoring the eyes of everyone that passed them. It's so rare to see someone your age that deep in thought. The gray-haired man commented, now at Naruto's side. What was this old guy doing? Allow me to walk with you. I'm sure there's something in this head of mine that can help you with your thoughts. Unsure how to respond, Naruto simply gave a boisterous, sure, and began to walk again. As they walked, Naruto planned to bombard the man with questions in an attempt to annoy him enough to leave so that the villagers would stop staring, but somehow, it ended up being that the older man got Naruto to tell him of the makeup exam, and what he had to do to pass. They were now actually inside Naruto's apartment. Why did he let a complete stranger inside his home? And that's what's on my mind, Gramps. Naruto finished, still shocked that the older man was still with him. The two were seated at opposite sides of the round table that Naruto ate at. The stranger nodded as he had a better picture of the situation. Well, that is something to think about. I assume you have a plan? The old man kindly asked. Naruto quickly nodded up and down so fast that he resembled a bobblehead. Please, old man, Hokage is a perv. I'll just hit him with my transformation. Boom. Naruto emphasized the explosion with a rise in volume. The older man simply chuckled before he spoke. Well, since you've got everything planned out, I think I'll just let you in on something. The man had a glint in his eyes as he leaned in, and gestured for Naruto to come closer. When Naruto did so, the old man began to share something with Naruto that would change the blonde's life forever. Inside the scroll, whispered the old man. His tone had barely suppressed excitement in it. There is a seal that looks like this. Naruto was showed a picture of a circle with a bunch of odd characters written inside and around it. The image was left on the table as the man continued. Naruto unknowingly allowed himself his expression to change to one of attention and concentration. His mask had silently slipped off. That seal requires a small amount of chakra to be channeled inside of it, which will release a deck of cards. The man's tone gained more excitement as he began to grin, and that caused Naruto to grin right back, despite not understanding what was so important about a card deck. That deck is very special, and has been in that scroll since before even the first jutsu was inscribed on it. No one has ever opened it, but if you channel chakra in it, you'll find that what's inside will be a game-changing tool on your journey to becoming a shinobi, perhaps one the masses will remember for ages to come. Finished the old man as he leaned back, and waited for Naruto to digest his words. He could see the gears in the blonde's mind moving at an exemplary pace. The keen part of Naruto that no one knew of was completely exposed to the wise man. So this deck is way better than jutsu? Naruto loudly asked with stars in his eyes, his attempt to hide his true self both impressed and annoyed the old man. Impressed because of how genuine and polished it was, but annoyed that it was needed for this child to keep people from becoming aware of his true self. Oh well, that was why he was doing this, to free this youth of extraordinary potential. That, and he wanted to have a bit of entertainment to watch when he returned to his own dimension. Oh yes, much better than any jutsu you'll find in there, but you should know this, the old man grew serious. He was putting faith in that Naruto wouldn't misuse the gift he was about to be given. Naruto couldn't help but be intimated as this previously laid-back man grew stern, with a warning glare in his eyes that punched holes into his own. That deck will change your life. What's inside will make you look at yourself, really examine your values, morals, whatever makes you who are will be tested and change. He pressed on Naruto and saw that his words made the young blonde think. However, the old man softened his expression and put a hand on the young boy's shoulder. Naruto let his shock show, his eyes widened. Naruto heard the person across from him speak again. These next words had the most impact. With that deck, you will find the acceptance you desire. How do you? Naruto couldn't finish his question, instead he just stared at the man who completely saw through the mask he perfected since his early childhood. The man gave Naruto a smile as he stood up. I'll take my leave now. Besides, you need to get ready for your exam. Those words snapped Naruto out of his silent amazement. He quickly turned to the man who had reached the door. Hey wait, Naruto called. The man turned back to him with a knowing smile. The seal is inside the border of the paper on the top corner when you open it. Oh, and the next time you see me, the old man opened the door. You'll either thank me, or curse me before thanking me anyway. With a hearty laugh, the old man left the room, leaving Naruto alone with his thoughts. As Naruto ran through the forest with the forbidden scroll in his grasp, all he thought about was that old man, and the deck he talked about. There was no way a deck of cards could cause that much change in anyone. That guy had to be screwing with him. But the way he spoke when he told me. Naruto had been trying to think this through the entire time he was in this forest. He had a choice, either learn the jutsu, become a shinobi and not even look for that deck, or he could look for it, and if it was true. Well, if it was true, then Naruto didn't know what would happen to him. He would have to find out the only way he could. With a tightened grip, Naruto accelerated his pace to the location Mizuki instructed him to go. It took a few minutes, but Naruto arrived and had come a few hours early. He set the scroll next to a tree and turned his back to it. Naruto's gaze went upwards as he looked at the full moon. He stared for a few moments before he turned to the scroll, his decision made. A light old man. Naruto lowly spoke to no one. I'll bite. It's not like I don't have a few extra hours. From where he watched Naruto, Zeltrech smiled. He had a good feeling that Naruto would like that deck. Hell, any of the masters from the previous Grail Wars would kill for that deck. Naruto sat down, and leaned against the tree where the forbidden scroll previously laid next to. His hand shakily moved to open it, his heart pounded in his chest. He unraveled around 6 inches of the scroll, and examined the corner in the moonlight. At first, he saw nothing, but then like a beacon, he saw that odd circle with the strange characters appear with a slight glow the color of gold. How nobody saw this before him was unknown, but Naruto wasn't going to ask questions. His gain, everyone else could go suck a lemon. Following the instructions of the mysterious old man who just landed top spot on Naruto's favorite people list, he channeled chakra into the seal, and just like the man said, there was the deck. It was unbelievably simple in appearance, just a small case that was made of shiny black leather that was sealed with a single golden clasp. The actual case maybe was in few centimeters in thickness. Naruto wasn't sure, but one thing was undeniable. I can feel the power in here. Naruto spoke in an odd tone. The case was warm in his hand. Despite its small size, there was definitely something inside. Naruto gulped as he saw the another seal glow, and he moved his free hand to it. This was it, whoever that old man was. Thank you, Naruto said as he channeled the same amount of chakra as before into the seal on the clasp. Naruto only saw the clasp open by itself, and his vision was flooded with gold along with a burning sensation on his hand before everything went black. Then images started to flash in his mind. A golden chalice. Numerous individuals doing things he never thought possible, while others stood in front of armies before leading the charge. What looked like stats matched with names appeared next, followed by information that caused him to understand what it all meant. It all came in like a tidal wave. Naruto only heard bits and pieces yet understood it all. Servant class archer. Nobel Phantasm level, X. Excalibur. Eternal Arms Mastery A+. Random stats, items and skills continued to flash in and out with no organization, but everything was sorted in his mind. He knew which stats belonged to who did that, who owned this, and anything else relevant. He saw that old man again. Naruto somehow became aware of his name. He then started to see the cards. Each one showed an individual with all the previous knowledge shown that belonged to them now organized. In his mind, he saw the cards flying into the case, an impossible number yet. He knew that the magic used on the deck made storage child's play. Perfect copies of every class card were at his disposal, his command. This was Zeltrech's gift to him. You were right, Zeltrech, this deck really. Naruto was painfully ejected from his mind when a hauntingly familiar voice, filled with rage, bellowed, "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" in Naruto's ear. Well shit. Quote, Iruka Amino had no idea what he was going to do when he found that orange knucklehead, but he finally did, and the ramen junkie was sleeping of all things. The teacher lost it. When the shout instantly woke Naruto, Iruka grabbed him by the collar, and began to shake him like a rag doll. Naruto didn't try to resist as he was more focused on the raging pain in his head. All that information dumped into his head mentally exhausted him to the point where his body was heavily affected by the strain. After a few minutes, Iruka ceased shaking Naruto, much to the blonde's relief. His stomach wouldn't have taken it for much longer. Well, what in the hell led you steal the scroll? Iruka shouted again. Naruto gave him a confused look before he answered. His voice showed how taxed he was. What do you mean? I'm taking the alternative exam. Naruto wheezed out. Iruka should have known about this. And how'd he get here so fast? Naruto then considered that he probably was knocked out for that long. A sudden, sharp pain in his head ceased any further thought, and made a pained grimace form on Naruto's face. As Naruto struggled with the strain, he didn't notice the anger drain from the scarred face of the tan-skinned Chunin until he was placed with his back against the trunk of the tree he had leaned on earlier. Naruto slowly lifted his head up to see Iruka's black eyes that looked down at him with concern. He had never seen Naruto so exhausted. He didn't even look like he was able to stand up. Another thing Iruka noticed was the forbidden scroll itself had only barely been unrolled. Only the beginnings of the first row of kanji could be seen. Naruto, what are you talking about? What alternative exam? Iruka had no idea what Naruto was talking about. At all. Mizuki-sensei told me about it. Lethargically answered Naruto, too tired to do anything but answer. Said if I steal the scroll and learn a jutsu from it then I pass. And you fell right for it, huh fox? Iruka immediately spun around when he heard Mizuki's voice from behind, eyes shocked that his child friend had actually done this. Mizuki wore the standard outfit of a chunin, which consists of a green flak jacket, dark pants, and a dark shirt with his forehead protector attached to a piece of clothing that covered most of his gray hair. Both Naruto and Iruka noticed the Fuma shuriken on the newcomer's back. Mizuki looked at the blonde from his place 15 feet away from the two, a pleased smirk plastered on his face upon seeing Naruto's condition. He also saw the scroll wrapped up, and just waiting to be taken. Good job, Fox, mocked Mizuki, slowly clapping. You got the scroll. Somehow you got yourself in position where all I need to do is slit your throat, and then bring that scroll to Lord Orochimaru. Orochimaru! Iruka exclaimed in shock as he pulled out a kunai, ready to defend both his student and the forbidden scroll. Yep, the second I give him that scroll I'll be on my way to making a real name for myself. Mizuki grinned sickly as he spoke, and got ready to engage. Iruka did the same. There was a brief pause before the two men leapt at the other. Sparks flew when their kunai clashed before they broke away. Mizuki tossed a handful of throwing stars as he moved backwards, annoyed when Iruka barrel rolled out of the way, and throw his own at the newly reveled traitor. Mizuki, however, was on a rather tight schedule, and needed to finish this before someone else could intervene. Unfortunately for him, Naruto was already working on getting Iruka back up as he forced his right hand to move, and opened the case that held his newly acquired cards. Naruto shifted his gaze back to the fight, and saw the two men in a grapple. Mizuki gained the upper hand when he suddenly head-butted Iruka. The scarred man stumbled backwards, which allowed his former friend to tackle him. Naruto knew he had to move fast when he saw that Mizuki had gotten on top of Iruka, and began to unleash a steady stream of punches to the man's face. The sounds of flesh impacting flesh filled Naruto's ears. Damn fingers. I just need one. Naruto swore as he fumbled to get a card out. Finally he just shoved 2 fingers in the leather case and felt the warmth of the cards beneath his fingertips. Hey Naruto. Mizuki suddenly called to the blonde, his eyes still on Iruka, whose face was moderately bruised, and currently set in a wounded snarl when he saw a glint in Mizuki's eye. No, don't. Iruka was silenced when he felt hands tightly grip his throat. He tried to grab the traitor's face and shove thumbs into his eyes, but he couldn't, so he was forced to try to pry the hands off. Mizuki resumed to speak as he slowly strangled Iruka. He was going to be able to say his piece, but Naruto had managed to get 2 cards out when he pulled his fingers out. You know why everyone hates you? Do y'all wanna know? Mizuki called again, still not looking in Naruto's direction. If he did, then he would have seen Naruto lift up 2 black cards with similar designs, one in silver and more detailed than the other one, which had copper detailing. Naruto saw the cards' faces and smirked. He then began to pump chakra to cards. The 2 battling men were turned away from him, so they didn't see the white light that came from cards. This was his first time summoning a servant with the extremely modified deck Zeltrech gave him, so it would take a few moments. Naruto really didn't want to hear what Mizuki was about to say. He knew that whatever came out of that man's mouth would be true the second Iruka tried to stop him from saying it. We gotta go back 15 years, the night the 9-tailed fox attacked your birthday. Mizuki spat out the word. The 4th didn't kill it, he sealed it away in newborn baby. Mizuki wished he could see Naruto's face, see his spirit be crushed by his next words. Then again, the light that slowly faded from Iruka's eyes was a good sight too. That child was you. You, Naruto Uzumaki, are the 9-tailed fox. Mizuki was about to laugh, but an unknown voice that was filled with indignation lashed at him. How dare you tell such a disgusting lie about my master? The voice was definitely feminine, and seemed to belong to a young woman that sounded absolutely furious. A burning, killing intent bathed the area. It was as if a dragon had spewed flames everywhere. I will burn you alive for such a filthy lie. When Mizuki heard that, and felt an unknown energy gather behind him, the scroll was forgotten in favor of staying alive as he pounced off Iruka. The nearly suffocated man inhaled deeply as a decently sized fireball flew over him. Its path would have collided with Mizuki's center mass had the traitor not bailed. Instead it hit a tree and turned it to ash on impact. When he landed a couple meters away from Iruka on all fours, he was only able to lift his head up with all he could see was something bronze mere inches from his face. Mizuki couldn't even blink before his world exploded into stars, and he was suddenly airborne. He felt a shockwave travel throughout his body. The force of the impact shattered nearly all of his teeth, and flattened his nose while he ragdolled into a tree that he hit on the left side of his body. The tree dented while Mizuki's skull cracked, and the bones in his arm shattered. He was unconscious before he started to slide down to the grass. Iruka had regained his breath and tried to stand only for the pain in his face to suddenly make itself known. Iruka fell on his stomach, and was about to try to stand up again, but an unknown male voice all but ordered him not to, with a tone that radiated authority, like he was a military leader. Iruka didn't know it, but his assumption was almost spot on. "Keep still and save your strength. I'll assist you." Iruka's eyes were forcibly shut from swelling, so he agreed, and he soon felt a single broad, meaty hand pick him up like he was nothing before he was thrown onto a heavily muscled shoulder. Iruka felt cloth and cold metal along with thick skin that had more than a few veins prominent. Iruka also felt the power that radiated off this man. It was unlike anything he knew. It wasn't chakra, but it felt close. Iruka was about to ask the man his name when he heard the previously enraged female's voice, all traces of wrath removed. Her actual voice was very soft, like she never really got loud. He stayed silent when he began to register what she was actually saying. "Master, do not listen that trashes lies, you are not the beast he claims." Iruka knew she was talking to Naruto, but why did she call him master? And who were these people? Despite his questions, Iruka remained silent as he leaned against the same tree as Naruto, the woman still trying to convince an unusually silent Naruto to the contrary of what Mizuki said. She used a name that was completely foreign to him. "Zeltrech wouldn't have given you the deck if you were the kitsune, you know this is true." "I may not know who this Zeltrech is," Iruka piped up. He had to say something Naruto needed to hear. "But she's right. You may be the container of the nine-tailed fox, but you not the monster. You are Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto was silent until Iruka heard him sigh. "I've always known that there was a reason for their hate." Iruka heard Naruto speak in an exhausted tone. "I can understand their reason, but I won't take the blame for them." Naruto mumbled. The conversation ended. Undoubtedly, anyone available was searching for them, so all they had to was wait. Naruto's head had been down since Mizuki revealed the big secret, but frankly Naruto was so drained from the information dump he experienced a few hours ago that he found it impossible to get emotional. Naruto lifted his eyes up to see his servants, deciding to focus on them and deal with his feelings later. The first servant was the female one that had decided to sit on his legs with her own over them. When he faced her, Naruto instantly blushed from the closeness of his female servant's face. That face was a healthy pale with soft features, her yellow eyes regarded him with fondness, and warmth that was also reflected in the small smile she had. Her hair was teal in color, and went down to slightly above her knees if she stood up at her height of 5 feet 2 inches. In the front, most of her bangs fell in an almost straight line near her delicately thin eyebrows with 2 on the sides that went down to her collar. Attached to the tops of her ears were gold ornaments, and above those were 3 pearly white horns that grew out the sides of her skull. One on each side grew outwards with minor curves, another grew upwards at an angle and was short. The last horn was also the longest, it went straight up past her the top of her head for a few inches. She wore a simple yet elegant kimono that was modified for better movement. The lower part was cut in a way that showed off her legs but also kept a long central piece that covered her underwear. Her obi was black with a yellow bow in the back. Lastly were the white stockings that climbed to her mid-thigh, and her black sandals. All in all, she was around a 15 minimum, 18 maximum on the hotness scale. And that was out of 10. Contrary to what everyone thought, Naruto did not like Sakura. If anything, he only used her as a way to further make himself out to be an idiot. Overkill, yes, but it definitely increased people's belief that he was a complete moron. "Master, while I like that you find my appearance attractive, do not stare so intently." The 3-star berserker Kiyohime requested with a light blush as she raised a closed fan that was black with decorative gold in a crisscross pattern. Naruto quickly tilted his head back down, slightly embarrassed. "Lancer." Kiyohime stood up and turned to the other servant Naruto summoned. The blonde moved his head in the same direction. He stood around 10 feet away from the tree, his gaze on the moon, yet Naruto knew should even one thing feel off, the servant would instantly move to defend him from danger. The male servant was tall, bulky, and looked downright intimidating. His skin was very tanned, and on his thick biceps were wavy lines colored in red. His entire torso seemed to be encased in bronze armor that somehow showed off massive pecs and a six-pack. The wrists both had bronze bracers that were curved outward near the middle of the arms. He wore what Naruto could only describe as leather underwear that had a leather belt with iron at the front, what looked like an A stamped on it. His legs were equally if not more muscular than the arms, and from the knee down was bronze armor. Going back up to the giant man's upper body, Naruto saw curved armor on the top of the shoulders connected to the bronze armor that covered his vital organs and abdominals. He had a red cloak that flowed down the back, and lastly was his unique helmet. It was Corinthian-styled with slits for the eyes and mouth, and an arrow-shaped projection that went down between the eye holes, with a notch that seemed to be from enemy's weapon on the top and bottom of where the right eye saw through. The man's face was hidden by the black inside the helmet, only narrowed, white lines were visible. A plume of brilliant fire ran from the top point of the helmet down the back, only enhancing the man's intimidation factor. In one hand, he held a spear that was a foot longer than he was tall with a uniquely shaped spearhead that started from the shaft as a small, geometric diamond that spread out into two spikes that curved in the direction of the tip before the metal thinned then became a much larger diamond shape that ended in a sharp point that gleamed in the moonlight. His other hand carried a large, outwardly curved shield of bronze that had a thin edge, hinting to Naruto that it could potentially cut. A wide red circle was the only decoration on the shield that belonged to the two-star lancer, Leonidas I, the king of Sparta. Perhaps we should leave this location and find better shelter, Kiyohime suggested, though she winced when Naruto groaned. His body still felt the side effects of accepting the deck. Leonidas shook his head in the negative before he replied, "As we have a temporarily blind man, and of course the recovering master to watch over, that action would be unwise." The Spartan cocked his head to the side before he seemingly disappeared then reappeared in front of Naruto, the large shield held forward, and his spear held defensively. Kiyohime narrowed her eyes as she stood on the side of Naruto opposite to Leonidas, her fan spread which displayed the image of a red flame that had a serpentine dragon at its base. "Master, it seems we have company all around us." Leonidas cautioned yet welcomed the potential hostiles. Perhaps they could give him a good fight. A few moments later, black-cloaked individuals with porcelain masks that were designed to resemble animals materialized from behind the trees. Leonidas quickly counted their numbers to be approximately 17. The once king of Sparta frowned. This is all they brought? Did they think him weak? Clearly these shinobi needed to be taught the power of both a servant and a son of Sparta. Very well, I will gladly show them why Spartans are the deadliest warriors. However, that was not necessary as the cloaked people parted into two groups. An older man in white robes with red accents and a hat that had the same color scheme with a kanji that read, "Fire," walked out, and moved towards them. Leonidas returned to a more neutral stance, his shield held at his side, and Dori's spear rested on the opposite shoulder. Both servants remained at their master's sides. The wrinkly man that moved closer to Naruto could feel the power that resided in the foreign man and young woman. Naruto himself still rested on the tree, his body cried for sleep, but he knew he had to stay awake for just a little while longer. The robed man stopped in front of Naruto. The blonde opened his eyes, not at all surprised by who stood in front of him. "So how much did you see?" Naruto asked tiredly. He knew that the Hokage had to be observing him with that crystal ball. The Hokage was also well aware of Naruto's mask, and while he didn't he supposed it was for the best at the moment. "Enough to prove your innocence and to know about that deck." The Hokage pointed at the leather case that held the class cards. Naruto winced when he saw the look that the third gave him. That look meant Naruto had a lot of explaining to do. "We will discuss things in my office," decided the aged Kage before he ordered the Anbu to escort Iruka to the hospital to check for any possible head injuries. The instructor was also told that tomorrow he would have to give an official report. After two Anbu body flickered Iruka to the hospital, the third asked if Naruto was able to move. "Not really," Naruto stated simply before the Spartan moved to help his master up. The Hokage closely observed the uniquely equipped man. The design of his armor was unlike anything used in the elemental nations, especially his flaming helmet. The red markings on his body seemed tribal in nature, so perhaps Hiruzen could find where this man was from if he had someone do a bit of digging for him. After Leonidas had gently lifted Naruto to his feet, the Spartan kept his master standing by telling him to lean his back against the shield. Once he was stable, Naruto asked Kiyohime to dismiss herself for the moment, an action she did reluctantly. Hiruzen watched as the kimono-garbed woman with horns turned into a silver haze that found its way into Naruto's hand, and collected itself to form a card. Naruto lifted his arms up slowly so not to agitate them as he put Kiyohime's card back in the case. After he closed the clasp, Naruto stowed the case in his pocket before he gave his tired attention to his cage. The Hokage saw that Naruto was ready, so he a hand on both Naruto and Leonidas before he body flickered the three of them to his office. That was interesting, stated the servant as he helped Naruto into a chair in front of the Hokage's paperwork-ridden desk while the cage himself sat in his own chair. Leonidas opted to stand behind his master. Before you begin, started the Spartan king, he felt four presences in the room that were unseen. Dismiss your guards. This conversation would be wise for only your ears to hear. Leonidas calmly requested. Naruto nodded at the Hokage in agreement with the man behind him, so Hiruzen granted his request. With a snap of the cage's fingers, the Anbu guards left, and for extra measure, the third activated privacy seals that wouldn't permit anyone to listen to the discussion he was about to have. Now then, before we start this talk, may you give me your name, stranger? The third asked. My name is Leonidas the First. I hail from the Greek city-state of Sparta. Proudly declared the Spartan, his chest puffed out, though he kept his former position as king unsaid. I am aware of your name, and rank from what I have seen of my young master's memories. Leonidas added with less flair, and a bit of anger cracked in his voice. Naruto's eyes had widened. Before Naruto could request an explanation, the Lancer began to explain to both of them, his gaze on the Hokage. While the master was unconscious after channeling chakra into the deck, he saw bits and pieces of all of us that reside in the deck lives, and we saw more clearer visions of his life. Leonidas' helmet hid his scowl, but this wasn't the time to focus on that, there was a more pressing matter to deal with. Now then, the deck is the topic you wish to discuss, yes? The old cage nodded, then looked at Naruto and asked him how did Naruto learn of his newly acquired deck, and who was responsible for sealing it in there. Well, I was told about it after I bumped into an old guy with a beard in all black, who then began to talk and walk with me. Naruto told the cage that he had tried to annoy the man with his fake hyperactivity, but instead was somehow talked into telling this man about Mizuki's alternate exam, and how Naruto planned to succeed. Naruto saw the old man's eye twitch in annoyance when he brought that up. Naruto then continued with how his guest showed him a picture of the seal that contained the deck, the placement of the seal, and how to unlock it. He said that it's been there for a long time, and that no one's seen it. Naruto added, still in disbelief about that himself. However, the leader of his village informed him to the contrary. I saw a man matching your description as a janitor cleaning the vaults where items like the scroll are kept around an hour before you stole it. He lied to get you interested, then must have put the deck in when no one was looking. Hiruzen theorized with a rather disturbed look. A single man blended in with no suspicions raised, and not only managed to get inside the vault without anyone noticing, he tampered with the forbidden scroll, just so that he would make his story seem valid to Naruto. Okay, that's good. Naruto accepted his leader's explanation, though he had a bit of a smirk. For a second there I thought that everyone who ever looked at the scroll was blind if they missed that, it glowed gold. Naruto laughed then began to cough. His body demanded rest, and Naruto had better give in soon. Giving a sympathetic smile, the Hokage told Naruto to return to his home for now. We will continue this conversation tomorrow after you are assigned to a team. Naruto's eyes widened. Did that mean, seeing as how you've proven yourself to be capable of the summoning arts, a rather advanced technique when compared with the basic clone jutsu, I believe that I can bend the rules this one time? Stated Hiruzen as he reached under his desk and pulled out a Konoha headband. Naruto's arm protested when he reached out to grab the proof of his finally graduating, but he grasped what was held out to him. Thanks, old man. Naruto gave the Hokage a grateful smile, and got one in return. After being dismissed by his leader, Naruto was lifted up by Leonidas, who then put him in a piggyback position and took off. His speed easily could compare to a Jonin. Despite his D ranking in agility, the Spartan could easily move at speeds higher than the full potential of 20 people. As he ran, the Lancer asked what his master's plans were for gaining strength. The answer pleased him. While I don't intend to learn everything, I wouldn't mind being taught by some servants in addition to what my future sensei will teach me. Naruto saw the massive opportunity he had. These were legendary warriors inside these cards. He'd be a fool not to learn anything they were willing to teach him. Excellent. Leonidas exclaimed. "I will begin planning a physical training schedule for you after you've recovered that will surely get you into shape." "Alright, just don't make it too extreme," Naruto requested, rather excited that he was going to be trained by the legendary Spartan, and how willing he was to provide assistance. Inside her card, Kiyohime shook her head mournfully. Naruto had unknowingly agreed to undergo training from hell. She prayed for two things: that her master survived, and that he wouldn't turn out to be a walking mass of muscle like Leonidas. That would be truly a horrid outcome. The run home was over, and Naruto was finally in his room, out of those clothes, and ready for bed. Leonidas had returned to his card form, and an idea popped into Naruto's head. The cards required him to pump chakra into them at least once, and then a permanent connection was made, which allowed the servant to be summoned instantly, and come out on their own. So what if Naruto were to channel chakra into the entire deck as he slept? Naruto smiled at the burst of genius that would save him the time of going through every card individually, and give him access to everyone. Confident that this idea was one of his best, Naruto put his arm that held the case under a pillow with his hand on top of it, and he began to channel chakra into the cards as he pulled the sheets over himself. "Tomorrow is going to be a great day," was his final thought before he drifted off into a much-needed rest. He had no idea that one of his fingers was inside the deck, and touched a single card, channeling chakra directly into it while he also channeled it throughout the deck. Tomorrow would start anything but normal for him, and it would only spiral down afterwards. It was the next morning after Naruto had been led to a deck that contained cards that allowed him to summon heroes from another world. The time he woke was earlier than usual, yet his body felt refreshed, and his mind at ease. His pleasant state probably had something to do with the warm pillow his arms were wrapped around. Maybe it was due to how exhausted he had been the night before, but he had never known that a pillow could be so soft, warm, and smell so good. Smell? Since when was a pillow supposed to smell good? It was then that Naruto felt what was undoubtedly hair his face was nestled in, soft, and silky hair that was brown in color. Naruto gave a slight gasp as he realized that somehow, a woman was not only in his bed, but his hands were on rather intimate parts of her body. He knew one cupped a rather firm and impressively sized thankfully inside a bra while the other. Naruto turned beet red when he noticed that his other hand spooned the person, and if it weren't for her undergarments, that made Naruto redden even further when he felt how thin it was. She might as well not be wearing anything down there. Naruto screamed in his head. This wasn't happening. Naruto took slow, quiet breaths in order to calm himself down, and not wake up the female servant because that was the only thing she could be next to him. He had to think his way through this. Before he could even begin that process, he felt the woman move, and watched in dread as her head moved to give him a sideways glance which showed her light gray eyes. Naruto knew that the color had drained from his face, and now waited for the inevitable. Which was not what the blonde expected at all when the woman spoke to him rather giddily, like he wasn't groping her and all but fingering her womanhood. Then again, some servants practically would instantly be in love with him, so that may be the case here. Kiyohime was an example of this. "Good morning, my master," greeted the one-star assassin Matahari with closed eyes and a sweet smile. "As comfortable as I'm sure you are right now," Matahari spoke knowingly with a smirk that made Naruto avert his eyes as his blush returned. "Could you please move away just a little bit so your morning wood isn't poking my ass? It's been doing that for quite a while now," asked the assassin with a teasing tone and an innocent face. Naruto's face erupted into an atomic blush that would have put a tomato to shame when he heard that. Unfortunately, that was only the first of the many teases she had for him. The next further reddened Naruto's face, and made his eyes become swirls at the implications. "Also, unless you want to make a home run with me, just use 2 fingers down there, not your entire hand." Naruto was unable to talk, steam visibly poured out of his ears. Thank Kami that no one saw this. The sound of dishes shattering on the floor reminded Naruto that since he had channeled chakra into the entire deck, his servants could come out whenever they wanted. And when he felt a burning killing intent flood his room, Naruto realized with horror who this new individual was. Both master and servant fearfully turned to the source of the impending doom they felt. A dragon made of a bright blue flame snaked around the body of Kiyohime, her eyes shadowed by her hair. "Before I glass a large portion of this village," lowly spoke the barely restrained berserker, her noble phantasm held back by an iota of control. Naruto turned indescribably pale. He knew that Kiyohime had the power to do such a thing. She burned down a large mountainside monastery because some monk broke a promise to her, and that was after she turned into a fucking dragon from rage alone. Kiyohime lifted her head up. Her yellow eyes shined with the same rage that enabled her to transform into a dragon despite not having any draconic blood inside her body. Please share with me the reason why someone is in your bed, master. And don't lie. Kiyohime didn't even need to speak further. Naruto already knew her insanely intense hatred of lies from the information that was shoved into his mind last night. It's really not what you think. Naruto cried as he leapt out from underneath the blanket, thankful that he had worn a plain t-shirt to bed with sweatpants. He quickly provided more evidence to the irate woman. Last night I decided to fall asleep while channeling chakra to the cards. I must have touched hers while doing this. Nothing happened. Naruto pleaded his case, which was further backed up by the servant that still laid in his bed, covered by the blanket. It's true, Mata Hari calmly confirmed. When I was summoned, and found myself in the master's arms, Kiyohime's eyes narrowed and her flame grew in temperature. The food at her feet fried to black crisps. Naruto moved back in alarm a few steps. Thankfully that action went unnoticed by the berserker. I decided to fall asleep there and warm the master's spent body instead of leaving and risk awakening him in the middle of a much-needed slumber. Would you not have done the same? Mata Hari finished her explanation. The question rhetoric yet was answered when Kiyohime thankfully began to power down. The flame gone, but the charred entrance to Naruto's room would remain evidence of her near meltdown. Naruto just sighed in relief. Okay, crisis averted. However, it seemed that Naruto's morning wasn't quite done with surprises. Mommy, is everything okay in there? The three in the room turned to the source of the voice, and immediately felt pangs of pity inside. Outside the blackened doorway stood a pale-skinned young girl that looked to have just turned 13. Her hair was short, only going down to her neck, and color of silver, while her eyes seemed to be a light gray with a slight green tint. There were 2 scars on her face, one that went down the middle of her left eye, and the other on her lower right cheek. Her body was covered by the upper half of a black buttoned coat that was in horrible condition, the bottom in tatters. The girl's small hands were covered by different materials, the right wrapped in medical bandages that continued underneath her ruined coat, while the left wore a black, fingerless glove. Lastly, she wore what Naruto assumed were black boots with purple bottoms. He also knew from the information on card that she was 4 feet 4. We felt a murderous aura, then it left. Spoke the 5-star assassin class servant Jack the Ripper. A soul even more tortured than Naruto himself. Something he never thought possible until he saw just bits and pieces of her painfully short life. There was a brief disagreement, but it got settled. Naruto answered. The other 2 servants stood silently while their master talked. Both knew it was best for him to handle this particular servant given her history of brutally killing and carving out the organs of women that rejected to be her mother, so they were rightfully cautious as Jack began to walk towards Naruto. We're glad things worked out, the girl stated as she shyly wrapped her arms around her master. Naruto knew better than to object to the action, and honestly couldn't bring himself to do it. To do so would make the blonde master no different from the villagers that he loathed so much. There was also that he had been in her shoes, he had slept on the street, wishing for a mother, for a warm bed. For 2 years he lived like that, and what occurred in that time cemented his thoughts on the people that lived in Konoha. It was because of how much their lives paralleled that Naruto showed no hesitation to return the hug. He accepted the responsibility. He knew zero about parenting, but he'd be damned if he refused Jack's desire. Man, Naruto realized that he'd have to get used to being called mommy, mom, or mother, given that her card told him that regardless of gender, he would be referred to as those by her. These cards, I'm a deck Zeltrech. Granted, he did tell Naruto that the deck would change him, but this was completely different from what he thought that meant. Jack's bashful voice caused Naruto to look down at the girl, who looked to the side, unsure of herself. She swallowed before she spoke again, her face tilted towards him. Her eyes are broken eyes had a glimmer of hope. Can we eat breakfast together? The lack of confidence in such a simple request broke everyone's hearts. Mata Hari returned to card form, her bronze haze went to the deck that was still under the pillows while Kiyohime swiftly left the room. Naruto noticed her shoulders tremble. Of course we will. Naruto softly answered. The twisted girl's expression lit up. We'll eat most of our meals together. The girl gave him probably the first one she ever formed a beaming smile before she broke away and sprinted to the table. Naruto sighed as he stood up before he retrieved his deck from underneath the pillows. He smelt something in the kitchen. Kiyohime must be redoing breakfast. Actually, why was she making breakfast earlier anyway? Did she intend to serve him breakfast in bed? Not that I'd mind. Kiyohime is a 15 to 18 after all. Naruto thought, trying to brighten his mood before he changed into his, kill me, orange jumpsuit. Naruto really hated these villagers. Once dressed, Naruto left his room. Jack seated on one of the only two chairs that he had. Kiyohime seemed to be preparing some eggs with quickly fried rice. It was simple, but Naruto didn't have much. But I still have more than Jack ever had. Naruto sadly reminded himself. He had a roof over his head, running water, electricity, food, clothing, and an allowance from the Hokage. Jack never had anything. Mother, why do you look sad? The subject of his thoughts asked, concern in her eyes. Naruto had to stop himself from laughing bitterly, the irony of this situation not lost on him. The person who had nothing worrying about the one who has everything. It was such a bad joke. Nothing, Jack. Just thinking about some things. Naruto answered. That seemed to be enough for her as she nodded. When she opened her mouth, Naruto wanted to break everything in his apartment. We always thought about things, but we mostly thought about finding mommy. Jack admitted to him, unaware that Naruto's knuckles had turned white from how tight he clenched his fists under the table. All she ever wanted. It was so cold, we were so hungry, so tired, the smoke choked and blinded us. Jack spoke with her head tilted down, her eyes filled with tears that didn't fall. The melancholic tone she spoke with only further increased Naruto's building anger. However, that anger evaporated when Jack, the girl who had been broken in the worst ways, and died with nothing to be remembered for except murders that were done in anguish, she looked up at him and smiled. But everything is okay now. We found mother. Naruto just stared at her slack-jawed. All it took for her to let it go was acceptance by someone. For someone to step up to the plate. Damn it, Naruto growled internally. That was all it took. Food's ready. Jack's excited voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Kiyohime brought 2 plates with 2 eggs with a side of rice on each, then left to prepare her own plate. Jack looked curiously at the meal. So this is what eggs look like when they're cooked. Jack, Naruto called for her attention, which he immediately received. I hate to tell you this, but I need to leave for possibly a few hours. When Jack's eyes filled with tears again, Naruto instantly knew what she was thinking, and he promptly shattered those thoughts. Don't worry, I'll bring back lunch, and don't forget that I can always carry you in card form. Naruto assured his recently acquired daughter she did nothing wrong, yet she had it far worse than him. If it was just so that Jack could know what happiness was, he'd welcome her calling him mother. We forgot about that. Jack's mood immediately brightened, and she gave him another beaming smile. It was so innocent, so kind. It almost made Naruto forgot who she was. While that innocent side was indeed genuine, that would only be towards him, and possibly but not likely other servants. Anyone else and the Ripper will come out, and a massacre was bound to happen. As her master, Naruto was the only thing that could hold her back. Stop Jack from releasing the killer inside. To her, he was all that mattered, everything else was just something to butcher. Wow, this is so good. Naruto looked to see Jack wolfing down her food, the chopsticks untouched as she ate with her hands. The eggs surprisingly were gone without a mess. The girl now finished off her rice. So good. We've never had something like that before. Get used to it, Jack. Naruto told the servant across from him. It's not changing, and you'll always have a full stomach from here on. Naruto vowed, though Jack was too busy trying to imagine always having a full stomach to respond. She decided that it sounded amazing. Naruto finished his meal and went to put on his headband, but stopped himself from tying it on his forehead. He frowned at the leaf symbol carved into the metal. I'm only doing this until I'm strong enough that I'm hightailing it. With that confirmed, Naruto wrapped it on his forehead. Jack and Kiyohime, who had finished her own plate rather quickly, both returned to his deck, but another servant seemed to come out, and it was a strong one at that. The golden haze went a couple of feet in front of Naruto, and produced a flash that forced Naruto to look away. When the light faded, the blonde genin looked to see who stood in front of him. He proceeded to shat bricks when he realized who the servant was. He dropped to one knee with a single thought in his head. Crap. Red eyes that regarded him as lower than dirt, and a scowl to match were the first things Naruto noticed, followed by the male servant's brilliant golden armor with blue markings that matched his slicked back golden hair. His presence made Naruto feel like an insect, and it didn't help that this servant was a planet buster. Those red eyes scanned Naruto's apartment without his head moving, though it was only for a few seconds. Those seconds were the tensest of Naruto's life. The 5-star archer-class servant closed his eyes and gave a deep sigh, his arms crossed over his chest. If your circumstances were any other, I would not have bothered to come out, much less in this hovel you call a home. Gilgamesh, the king of heroes, told Naruto with annoyance that thankfully wasn't directed at him, but towards the setting of their meeting. However, the red-eyed man stared down at Naruto, who thought it best to listen then speak. This is a unique situation, and because of your circumstances, I will allow this to slide just this once. Naruto internally sighed in relief. He remembered that these servants had seen his life when he saw theirs, and it appeared that the man in golden armor was cutting him some slack because of said circumstances. Naruto wasn't sure if he should be happy or peeved about that. You may express your gratitude. Gilgamesh instructed Naruto, something that he immediately did. He wasn't one to roll over, but when it was someone that could one-hit kill your entire world, well. Thank you for your understanding, King of Heroes. Naruto didn't use the servant's name just in case that would be viewed as disrespectful. And Naruto really didn't want to get on the ancient king's bad side. Not to be rude, Naruto slowly lifted up his head, looking for any signal to put his head back down. Surprisingly, there was none. But why did you come out to see me? Naruto asked the man he knelt before, to which Gilgamesh raised a brow. Naruto tensed. Most mongrels jump for joy when they summon me, yet you would much rather not be near me. Observed the king of heroes before he smirked. Those mongrels also had no real power, and while neither does your current self, the chakra of this world allows for even a mere mongrel to bend the elements to their will. Gilgamesh stated, his face now stared down at Naruto's nervous yet attentive one. The summoner still knelt. The golden man was pleased that unlike the other mongrels that he had to teach respect, this mere child knew his place. And now I find myself with a master that has every servant at his disposal. And what was the first thing he did with this new power? Gilgamesh directed the question at Naruto, who gulped before answering. Nothing. Exactly, nothing. Gilgamesh repeated. You do not desire to rule the world. You have not used the female servants to fulfill perverse fantasies. You have not demanded to be trained, and most surprisingly, the smirk grew in size. You have not unleashed hell on those that wronged you. It is just interesting enough to get my attention. Finished Gilgamesh. You're not wrong. Naruto moved his head to the side. I want none of those things, and while the thought of destroying this place did cross my mind, Naruto admitted. He had no reason to lie about this subject. It's just not me. I want to leave, and if they come looking, then I'll send back whoever they send in body bags or unable to walk. Naruto had turned back to the smirking king of heroes. That smirk was getting annoying. Fast, but I doubt you came just for me to answer a question. That damn smirk got bigger, and Naruto felt a twitch in his eye. What do you want? Naruto asked as respectfully as someone could ask that while also being as blunt as possible. Gilgamesh have a, hey, before answering. He had begun to walk around the now standing Naruto. This is a new world where my legend is not known, and I seek to fix that. Gilgamesh stated without hesitation, then revealed to Naruto the part that concerned him. You are in control of the deck, and therefore it is important that you are not weak. I imagine that there are reasons for you to want to keep that deck yours, correct? Jack flashed in Naruto's mind. Yes. Then I have a goal for you. Naruto now raised a brow. Gilgamesh didn't wait for a response as he continued. You have expressed a desire to learn from servants, a wise move given the world we live in, and now that I have been awakened, here is my challenge. Naruto narrowed his eyes, and that damn smirk got bigger. This world is interesting, as is chakra, but my treasures can do the same job much better and efficiently. However, while I am unbeatable, you are not and must be guided to an acceptable level of power before I act. Naruto understood where he was coming from, but still, if I have all these servants, why is my level of strength a concern for you? Unless someone figures out that I'm basically your power source and offs me, which will almost be impossible with the likes of Lancelot, Medea, and countless others guarding me, You still will last years after I'm dead. Naruto pointed out. Gilgamesh nodded in agreement, but did have a response to that. Be that as it may, your situation intrigued me. I want to see what the child with the deck of heroes will do. In other words, your challenge is. Gilgamesh stopped pacing circles around Naruto, the two across from the other. To entertain me. Gilgamesh finished with that asshole smirk back. Naruto, however, was in a deadpan. So not only do I have to entertain an immortal wizard, I now have to entertain a golden king too. Naruto droned, already tired of this BS. Gilgamesh's smirk somehow got bigger, aware of who Naruto referred to. Yes, but unlike your other viewer, I will reward you with 3 things. Okay, now Naruto was interested as the Golden King told him of the 3 rewards. First, you shall have my respect for the performance. Naruto internally rolled his eyes, but kept a straight face on the outside. Second, I will ensure that you live expense-free in my new kingdom. Okay, that one made Naruto smile ear to ear. No taxes. And your third reward will given upon completion of challenge. Gilgamesh paused for a moment, and closed his eyes with that smirk still in place. If you have reached a significant level of strength, then instead of merely overseeing your progress, I shall train you myself. When Gilgamesh opened his eyes, he was pleased to see the look of absolute disbelief on the blue-eyed blonde's face. Yes, I shall train you, but you must not only survive the training that the others will put you through, you need to thrive in it. Naruto composed himself while the archer talked, but his brow furrowed at the end. Damn, that was a tall order. You're a hard man to please. Naruto stated with a sigh. Gilgamesh knew he had him. This might actually be fun. Now then, mongrel, I shall leave you to the other mongrels for now, but rest assured, there are other matters that we must discuss at a later time. Gilgamesh then faded into the golden haze from before, and disappeared as it went inside the deck. Naruto let out a relived breath he didn't know he held. The newly minted genin went to leave for his team assignments before anything else could happen, and nothing did. At least, not inside. It was when Naruto left the building, his false persona equipped for the day, that something else happened, courtesy of Leonidas. Naruto had just walked out. That fake goofy grin he wore to annoy the heck out of the villagers was plastered on his face. He had barely turned around when he felt a large mass of rock pushed into his back. Ropes quickly were wrapped around his torso, and tightened the rock against Naruto's body to where it would not move. This had all happened before Naruto could even begin to react. The sudden increase in weight almost made him fall over. However, that was prevented when a sharp, metal point poked into his rear. With a yelp that made every person around whip their heads in his direction, Naruto rocketed forward. The weight of the large stone strapped to his back kept him from running at a full speed, and quickly forced him to stop for breath. Naruto, you must keep moving. The voice of Leonidas barked from behind as Naruto felt the same point poke into him without going through his pants again. Unable to stop his body's self-preservation instinct, Naruto took off once more. The hell is wrong with you? Naruto hollered angrily as he ran. Leonidas closely followed. His helmet was without the fiery plume from last night. Instead it possessed one made from densely packed feathers cut to an even curve. Every other aspect of his appearance was unchanged. Don't stab my ass with a spear. Unfortunately for you, this is part of your training, replied the Spartan, who quickly continued. You will run to the team assignments as fast as you can with that stone on your back without slowing or stopping. Are you kidding me? Naruto shouted as he was chased down the road, the villagers unsure of what was happening, more concerned about getting out of the way. I told you I will ensure your body reaches peak condition, did I not? Leonidas replied with more force behind his words. He gave his blonde master another jab when he saw Naruto slow down a tad. My calculations assure me that this is the quickest way to achieve that goal. I told you not to go to extremes. Naruto yelled, furious when he was prodded again. I didn't, otherwise it would be a block of iron on your back. Leonidas defended his method, pleased when he saw Naruto increase his speed by a small yet noticeable fraction. You're crazy, crazy, Leonidas repeated with a mad grin before he bellowed with valor, I am Sparta. Iruka, despite the betrayal of his childhood friend, had awakened that morning refreshed and the swelling in his face was gone. He had also been pleased to learn from an Anbu messenger that Naruto had allowed to pass due to his abnormal and powerful summons. The Chunin instructor was proud to see his entire class graduate, and he prayed for their safety and success, yet he knew that some of them may fall. It was the bitter truth of being a shinobi, and the one lesson that his former students could only learn on the battlefield. However, that wasn't a lesson they would need to learn right away, so today, he would be happy for them. Iruka had arrived at the room where the team assignments were to take place, pleased when the graduates quieted down, obviously eager to be placed in a team. Iruka quickly scanned the room for any missing students and frowned when he didn't see Naruto. "I thought he would be the first one here?" Iruka thought in confusion. He made a as he tried to make sense of why the blonde would miss this. "Hey teach, is something wrong?" asked a random student. Well, last night, the Hokage allowed Naruto to pass despite not being able to perform the clone technique. He revealed that he knew the summoning arts, and it turned out that his written test was graded wrong. He passed with C+. Iruka informed his rather surprised class. "Summoning arts?" was the common murmur among the students. Their teacher nodded. "Yes, it is an advanced technique that I do not know enough of to explain, so ask Naruto." Right as Iruka mentioned the missing blonde, the class heard the deep voice of man that Iruka recognized outside. The man's words were unclear, but they knew he was roughly encouraging someone. "I think I'll get the door." Iruka went to the side door on his left, the one closest to where the voice came from, the words now clear. "That's it. Just a few more meters and I'll remove the weight. Don't collapse now." The door was opened, and in came the missing dead last, with what had to be an over 60-pound stone tied to his back, and after him come the largest man the class had ever seen. His body was a mass of muscle and metal. With a triumphant laugh, the man simply yanked the ropes off with a single hand. The stone crashed on the floor. "You see, Naruto, all that you needed was some gentle motivation." The unknown man told the much shorter blonde who had his hands on his knees as he gulped down air, his body drenched with sweat. At the word, gentle, Naruto's head snapped up at the man. "You tied a fucking rock to my back and made me run here without stopping, and if I did slow down by just a hair, you stabbed me in the ass with that damn spear." Naruto cursed out the man, his shield and spear just now noticed by the class. He gave a booming laugh. "Yes, and your success confirmed my calculations regarding your ability to endure. Go jump inside Carmilla's Phantom Maiden." An enraged Naruto yelled before he went to sit down, roughly pushing others aside as he slid into the closest row that had enough room. Leonidas' snickers further inflamed him. Naruto was about ready to blow from the stress of his day so far as he put his arm on the desk in front of him, and rested his head on it. Finally, he could finally cool off. Iruka and the rest of class had been stunned into silence by Naruto's attitude. It was known that he had a temper, but this time he was just plain furious. Even Sasuke Uchiha, one of the students Naruto shoved out of the way, and Kiba Inuzuka, two male students that Naruto usually was at odds with, decided to leave the highly combustible blonde alone. Unfortunately, while the rest of the class chose to leave Naruto be, and Iruka returned to the stand after he politely asked Leonidas to leave and received a firm no that promised pain if the teacher insist, someone had to go and touch the proverbial reverse scale on the resting blonde. Not even 30 seconds passed before Naruto's eyes snapped open. The reason was one of the other people Naruto shoved aside to get to his current seat. Leonidas' smile was hidden by the darkness in his helmet while the multiple servants in the deck got ready for a good show. The straw that would break the camel's back, and cause Naruto's mask to violently shatter, would be none other than a tool he used to make it so convincing. How beautifully ironic. His false crush, the pink-haired Sakura Haruno, took serious offense to not only herself being forcibly moved out of the orange idiot's way, but the same idiot thought he could do the same to her precious Sasuke. "Idiot, what gives you the—" Sakura had started to screech until Naruto's upper body snapped back up, and he turned towards her with a sneer, and a glare worthy of Hercules that killed the noise before it could resume leaving her throat. "Shut the hell up, you flat, annoying bitch of a howler monkey!" roared the blonde. Every person, sans Leonidas, gaped at Naruto. Their eyes grew larger as he now began to go into an explosive rant. "Let me tell ya something. I've had to put up with your bullshit for who knows how long, and now it's my turn. So shut up and fucking listen, and if I want to hear you talk, then I'll shove my hand up your ass and work your mouth like a damn puppet." Naruto roared. The stressful morning he had combined with this pink bitch finally blew his lid. "If I had known that worrying about brain damage would be a constant in my life, I'd have skipped right over your overaggressive ass when I was looking for a girl to have a fake crush on, then I'd have gone with Ino." Naruto shouted, his words once more shocked his still speechless classmates. "At least with Ino," Naruto resumed, oblivious to how he was tearing down everyone's image of him. "The most I'd have to worry about is getting verbally torn down, and she's got a bangin' body that makes getting yelled at worth it. Not to mention that I'll never have to worry about if I'm going to go fucking deaf, because unlike your titless ass, Ino has a normal voice. Not one that could break glass with a fucking whisper." Naruto then turned forward and held his left hand over his eyes, and he took deep breaths to calm down. The entire room was already floored by the dead last's personality doing a complete 180. Iruka himself couldn't stop staring at Naruto with his mouth open, while Leonidas struggled to keep himself from applauding in approval. Sakura herself was shell-shocked, her mouth hanged open and mind blank. Before anyone could recover, a female voice that made the hand on Naruto's face spread. The gaps between his fingers showed that his eye was frozen in shock. "And why would you want either of those girls when you have me?" Kiyohime asked as she walked through the door. All eyes were on the teal-haired newcomer with the golden, pupilless eyes, and horns that everyone looked over, chalking that feature up to being a clan trait. Iruka also recognized the voice, and a sweat drop formed on the back of his head. Naruto had removed his hand from his head, and internally was on brown alert as three questions repeatedly sounded in his panicked mind. How did she get out without me noticing? What is she planning? And why the hell does she have a bento with her? Iruka didn't even bother trying to kick out the teal-haired woman who made her way towards Naruto. She clearly ignored all the eyes on her. Her kimono did appear very expensive, so that probably explained all the attention on her. The horned woman had just reached the row Naruto sat at, his place close to the end where an empty space was. In Kiyohime's way to that space was a recovered Ino, the still speechless Sakura, and an equally recovered Sasuke. Kiyohime closed her eyes and gave a small smile with her head tilted sideways. Her beloved had said that Ino was attractive to him, and she knew how much he hated the other two, so in her mind what she was about to do was completely fine. Everyone felt the temperature raise exponentially before a serpentine dragon made of blue fire began to fly closely around Kiyohime's body before she opened her eyes halfway and spoke with a sweet voice to the three that sat between her and Naruto. "Move." That single word was all that was needed to make the three stand up. The dragon disappeared, and Kiyohime had a pleasant look on her face as she walked to her precious master, and politely requested that he scoot to the right, against the wall. Naruto complied with a sigh, and was surprised when the draconic girl not only sat next to him, but pressed her lips against his cheek where he felt what was undoubtedly her tongue slide across the middle whisker. A shiny line was left when her lips parted, and she covered her lower face with her fan to hide the smirk that was definitely there. So that's what she was doing, letting everyone know that he belonged to her. Judging from how his fellow graduates gawked at the scene, it was working. Naruto sighed as he put his head down. The mask of a fool that he used was useless, and Kiyohime didn't help the situation, but raised even more questions. Still, he didn't mind the forwardness. It was nice feeling wanted for once. There were a few moments of silence, moments that Iruka went to take advantage of. "Okay, since there are no more interruptions," began the teacher before he was cut off. "Wait, we're not going to talk about what the hell just happened," interjected Kiba Inuzuka, much to Naruto's irritation. Multiple nods of agreement followed soon after. "Fuck you, mutt. I mean, we all know Naruto has a temper, but he just blew up on Sakura of all people, and he practically admitted to pretending to like her this entire time. What else about him isn't true?" Every other student directed their eyes at the back of Naruto's head, clearly agreeing with the Inuzuka. Shit, fuck you, Kiba. As troublesome as this is, Shikamaru Nara, a highly intelligent and equally lazy individual, spoke up, and added to Kiba's point. "I have noticed that whenever Naruto is getting yelled at by Sakura, his grin is just barely strained, and after he recovers from a punch, his fists are clenched pretty tight. I've also heard him grumbling quite angrily afterwards too. And now I need to kill Shikamaru." Naruto thought as the genius added to the fire, for once putting in effort, but it was at Naruto's expense. He didn't get to focus on it when he felt a shiver, and the temperature around him rise a bit. He looked to his right to see that Kiyohime's fan was aflame as she slowly waved it vertically in front of her face, and her eyes were narrowed, and kept forward. Naruto gulped. Please don't go yandere, please don't go yandere. Thankfully, Kiba made himself a target. And how did Naruto get this chick into him? If he's been faking this entire time, then how does she who the real Naruto is? At that moment, Naruto knew that Kiba fucked up as the flame turned blue. Are you implying that my husband has been lying to me? Kiyohime asked with a voice that, while neutral, the surrounding people could tell that she barely held back a growl. Iruka, Naruto, and Leonidas all gulped at the same time, then a certain H word registered. Husband, exclaimed multiple students while Naruto was having an internal crisis. The events of this morning undoubtedly had a hand in driving Kiyohime to go this far, but he had more pressing matters to deal with. I can't bullshit my way out of this. Where do I even begin? Cried Naruto, who had no way to answer the inevitable questions. He wanted to keep the deck secret, damn it. Naruto just had to hope that people would buy his last-ditch effort to keep people from wanting to investigate on their own. Well, I'm not her husband yet, at most I'm her fiancé. Naruto spoke with a light blush, trying to not only convince his class that it was true, but not outright lying so Kiyohime wouldn't torch him. He was about to continue when yet another person entered the room through the door at the top of the stairs. Their voice was immediately recognized by Naruto. Yes, you two still have yet to pick a date and place for your wedding to be held. Zeltrech said with a shit-eating grin as he walked down the aisle. Iruka sighed as yet another person walked into what was supposed to be a private room. He also wondered why the Jonin or the Hokage haven't come to kick anyone out yet. This was getting on his nerves. I am truly glad that I found the son of my late friend Ichigo, who along with his wife, had died visiting this village on vacation with their newborn son due to the attack of the horrible fox. Zeltrech began to tell everyone a sob story. His acting skills would have fooled Naruto and the two servants if they didn't know who this person really was. Wait, you know Naruto parents? A shocked student asked. The gray-haired man nodded with a sad smile as he answered. The story he told made Naruto have to stop himself from grinning. Yes, they were nobles from the land of tea. I was a close friend of Naruto's father. I had even arranged for a marriage between these two. And I thought those plans cancelled until my eyes landed on a boy who greatly resembled my friend when he was that age. Zeltrech continued to paint a false lineage for Naruto. The blonde held Kiyohime's hand to keep her from exposing this lie. The hidden physical contact silenced her. In fact, you bear a great resemblance to him now, Zeltrech declared, and took out a picture the size of a piece of paper from a folder everyone just realized was tucked under his arm. Everyone was too busy staring at the person in the photo to see even Naruto's eyes widen. The man in the photo had short blonde hair, blue eyes the color of the sky, and a peach skin tone. The only clothes visible were his orange sweater that had a zipper in the middle, but what caught everybody's eye and made it nearly impossible to deny that the man in the picture was Naruto's father were the triple whisker marks on both sides of his smiling face. They also noticed that he was missing 2/3 of his arm. Iruka even believed that this Ichigo was Naruto's father when he walked over to see the picture for himself. Naruto, however, knew that the man Zeltrech claimed was not his father since Zeltrech was also in the photo with an arm around the other man. The new master didn't know how Zeltrech pulled this off, but he was grateful that the wizard marshal just saved his ass by distracting everyone from his engagement. Though he had more than a few things to say to the man. Naruto intended to have a long discussion with Zeltrech regarding the deck. Oh, and before I forget. Zeltrech walked in front of the stands, Naruto seated on the second row from the bottom, and handed the manila folder to Naruto. He then gave a farewell before he walked out the side door. Iruka breathed in, held it for a few seconds then let it out. So Naruto, Iruka got everyone's attention on him. Is there any other thing concerning you going to interrupt me, again? Naruto took this moment to be a smart ass. Yeah, my wedding planner wants everyone to help us pick a cake, and take any suggestions for a place to have it or the reception at. Naruto sarcastically told Iruka, who rolled his eyes. Kiyohime giggled from behind her fan while Leonidas openly laughed. Iruka then finally began to give the team assignments. Teams are same as canon, skipping to an hour after. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura had spent the past hour after learning that they were selected to be Team 7 under a Kakashi Hitaki. When enough people left, the black-haired Sasuke Uchiha and his loyal fangirl left the row Naruto and his horned fiancé sat. The latter held Naruto's arm to her chest, and laid her head on his shoulder, the horns positioned in a way that wouldn't stab him. Leonidas opted to stay in the corner closest to him. The Spartan thought about the best way to beat the importance of being on time to tardy man that was assigned to be his master's teacher. Pa, Naruto will be better off with us training him than whoever this late helot is. After another half-hour passed, and Leonidas began to busy himself sharpening his spear. Naruto sighed as his stomach gave a low growl. Oh, you're hungry, my dear? Kiyohime asked as she placed the bento she had brought on the desk in front of them. The contents had been continuously heated by her control of fire. Steam gently rose from the teriyaki beef, shredded eggs, and pickled vegetables on top of seasoned rice. There was only one pair of chopsticks inside, and Kiyohime was the one who held them. Say ah, the female servant told Naruto after she picked up a piece of beef that had a bit of egg and rice stuck to it. The food held a distance from her master's mouth. Naruto gave her a flat look. Seriously? What was he, 5? Kiyohime frowned a tad but brought the offered food closer, intent on feeding her beloved. Come on, let me feed you, insisted the yellow-eyed servant. I made this for you. Naruto's eye twitched, but he relented when she gave him puppy dog eyes. He opened his mouth, and after the food was placed inside, he began to chew. His eyes widened as the flavors hit, and Naruto lost all resistance as he eagerly accepted the next offered bite. So good, Naruto praised after he swallowed. Kiyohime blushed lightly. I sprinkled shichimi spice on top of it before I packed it, and seasoned the rice with a bit of salt, explained Kiyohime before she placed a bit of the bento's contents in own mouth. The smell of the meal had filled the room. The other two students stared at the happily eating pair with hunger in their eyes. Leonidas also felt a bit famished, and told Naruto that he was going to get some food when Kiyohime tossed him something wrapped up. When he unraveled it, Leonidas was pleased to find a large turkey leg inside. The lancer removed his helmet, and let his red hair and eyes show before he began to eat, further increasing the other two genins' hunger. It was another hour and a half until a man with spiky silver hair and a mask that covered his lower face walked in. His headband covered another third of his face. He looked around and saw the hungry Sasuke and Sakura, a muscle-bound man with a helmet on that he could feel an intense glare from, and a teal-haired girl with horns laying her head on Naruto's shoulder. This was not what he expected. Team 7, I presume? He asked. Yeah, we're them, Naruto confirmed, rather liking the soft feeling of Kiyohime's hair on his shoulder. The other two students only nodded. My first impression of you three, the pink and black-haired ones suck, while the blonde has his priorities straight. Meet me on the roof. With that said, their Jonin-sensei body flickered to the roof. Well, I like him, Naruto decided as he got up, and told Leonidas and Kiyohime to wait for him. The servants nodded in acknowledgement while Naruto's teammates glared at him. Naruto gave them the finger and twirled it before he exited. The other two genin followed. Once the three genin were on the roof, their sensei told them to introduce themselves. Sensei, why don't you go first to show us how it's done? Requested Sakura. Naruto looked at her with an, are you serious? Expression? Are you sure this one was the smartest in your class, because this pink mongrel seems no smarter than the ants I step on? Gilgamesh stated more than asked from within Naruto's mind. Alright, my name is Kakashi Hitaki, began the Jonin. Naruto's opinion of his new sensei rose as he gave his demonstration. I don't feel like telling you what I like, I do have plenty of dislikes, and you're all too young to hear my dream. The more uptight genin of the three thought, all that we found out was his name. While Naruto internally laughed at the way their sensei trolled the other two. Your turn, Pinky. Kakashi indicated for Sakura to go. My name is Sakura Haruno, I like. She began, then looked at Sasuke with a blush. Naruto cringed on the inside and nearly of the heroes in the deck groaned. My dream is too. Another blush followed by a squeal came from her. More cringes and groans came from the deck. Okay, and what do you hate? Kakashi asked, clearly uncaring of the answer. Naruto, shouted the Haruno with disdain. Feelings mutual, ya flat bitch, retorted Naruto with a smirk. Sakura began to grind her teeth together and wanted to launch him. Sasuke blinked once, his posture indicated the barest annoyance. At who, Kakashi didn't know, but he had a good feeling of the person's identity. Next is Mr. Broody. Kakashi pointed at Sasuke, pleased to see a twitch. Soon after, the Jonin instinctively raised his hand to catch a small wad of Ryo thrown in his direction, courtesy of the blonde to his right. "And this is for," Kakashi said, counting the bills. "You're entertaining," was Naruto's simple answer. Kakashi made a note that the Uzumaki enjoyed humor, and saw a way to make a few quick bucks. Sasuke glared at Naruto, who just now noticed the black-haired boy's gaze. "Oh, I'm sorry, did I break your concentration?" Naruto gave a faux apology, his face a near-perfect mask of remorse. Kakashi noted that Naruto was good at faking emotions, and was quite the actor. Perhaps his real personality would be the only one of this team he could tolerate, thought the Jonin with a smile under his mask. "My name is Sasuke Uchiha," the emo stated. Sakura immediately gave him her complete attention while Kakashi cried internally about a fangirl being his team, while Naruto winced lightly when female servants began to criticize said fangirl. Their complaints were rather loud from the amount that spoke. "Mother, can I rip her to pieces tonight?" asked Jack. Bloodlust oozed from her voice. "I would not drink her blood to save my life," spoke the Blood Countess Carmilla in disgust, one of the 4-star servants of the assassin class. "Never summon me around her or you'll have to explain why her ashes spark red lightning," requested a 5-star berserker called Mysterious Heroine X Alter with a monotone voice. Naruto called for quiet before it got too loud. He caught the last part of Sasuke's introduction, and what he said made multiple servants roar with laughter at it. "My ambition is to kill a certain man," evenly finished the Uchiha. "And now for the resident actor." Kakashi moved on to the hopefully less bland Naruto. "Name's Naruto Uzumaki. My real interests are mine to know, my actual dislikes follow the former, and my true dream which is not to become Hokage." Naruto largely followed his sensei's example in revealing nothing in his introduction. "Well, that's my business. Not yours." Sasuke held back a glare while Sakura had no problem with it, and Naruto gave an infuriating response to it. "Take a picture, it'll last longer." Kakashi waved his hand to signal for his genin's attention, which was given. "Okay. Meet me tomorrow at training ground number 3 for your genin test." Kakashi instructed his genin. Sakura immediately asked a question. "Wait, we already passed that test, right? That was just to separate those who were ready from trainees that aren't." Kazali dismissed the Jonin with a wave of his hand. "Tomorrow is the real test. Now I suggest you arrive at the specified area at 9 a.m., and don't eat breakfast or you'll throw up." With that warning, Kakashi disappeared before another inquiry could be made. Sakura turned to remind Naruto of his place, but he was already heading back to the room he left his companions at. Sakura huffed before she took off after leaving Sasuke to pester him for a date. When Naruto returned to his servants, he was welcomed back by Leonidas. "So, master, what did the late Hela tell you up there?" asked Leonidas when Naruto sat next to Kiyohime, her position unchanged. The Spartan himself stood at the bottom of the stairs across from the other two. His height kept their gazes more or less even. Naruto chuckled at the way the Lancer addressed Kakashi, the word Helad, used to describe a slave in Sparta. "He just wanted us to introduce ourselves, and told us that we have a test tomorrow. He suggested not to eat, and meet him at 9 o'clock in the morning." Naruto shared with a bit of a glint in his eyes. "Given how he cared less about being on time today, I'm sleeping in, and I not only want breakfast but 2 bentos ready." "Oh, you want a big lunch?" Kiyohime already thought about what she would make. Naruto shook his head with a mischievous smirk. "Undoubtedly, those 2 are going to listen to our sensei, but I know enough about misdirection to figure out his game." Naruto stood and requested Leonidas to return to card form. After that sentence, the bronze haze that was the Spartan went into the case that held the deck. Naruto signaled for Kiyohime to walk with him as he continued speaking, the servants able to hear him despite being in card form. "The other bento is for Kakashi. I want to help him in his torture of my teammates." Naruto snickered as he held the door for his draconic servant. Light hesitance showed before she walked through. The 2 left the building, Kiyohime 3 steps behind Naruto as they walked back to his apartment. The unofficial genin was aware of the wife training she undertook in life, and that she believed in the old-fashioned, wives should be seen, not heard, way of thinking, with her own twists of course. The dragon already had shown a severe intolerance of disrespect towards him, and wasn't afraid to melt someone for his sake, or to secure her place as his wife. So what was in the folder? Naruto inquired regarding what Zeltrech left behind. Naruto really owned him for running damage control. That guy must think he's hit the goldmine with me. Especially after this morning. Naruto knew that he was constantly being watched by the man who gave him the deck. The same man Naruto wanted to rip a new one for not warning him about the quirks of these servants. I have not looked through it. Kiyohime answered softly. I believe that you should be the one to see its contents first. Naruto understood where she was coming from given how much he resembled the man in the picture. Kiyohime must not have wanted to overstep unknown boundaries. However, he didn't want to think about that at this moment. Naruto needed to discuss certain things with the servant that walked behind him. Specifically, her desire to be his lover was something to be addressed now. Kiyohime, walk besides me. Naruto requested. There was another moment of hesitance, but like before, it was quick. Once she walked at his side, Naruto spoke again. You put on quite a show earlier, licking my cheek like that. Naruto commented with a teasing tone. He watched for her reaction. While I would have preferred to show my affection for you privately, Kiyohime stated, her soft voice heard only by him, and not the villagers that started in confusion at the pair. For once, Naruto didn't care. It was necessary to show that you are mine. I will not allow human rivals. Kiyohime told him with a smile. Yet Naruto could feel her possessiveness from it. Human rivals, huh? What if another servant were to show interest? Naruto asked. It was an honest question, and one that he felt needed to be asked given this morning. I admit that I overreacted this morning. Kiyohime's head dipped a little in shame, but it rose again when she continued speaking. But to answer your question, it depends on how such a servant approaches with her desire. If she tries to steal you away, I will turn her to an ash statue. Kiyohime's eyes darkened, and for the briefest moment, her smile turned twisted before she returned to her calm, gentle expression. On the other hand, if she chooses instead to talk, then I listen to her feelings, and no harm will be done. Naruto asked another question, this one threw Kiyohime for a loop. And if she wants to share? To Naruto's surprise, Kiyohime nearly tripped but caught herself. She looked at him with her peripherals as she asked for an elaboration. What do you mean by share? She doesn't mind if there's another woman in the relationship. Naruto answered. I only ask this because there's a portion of female servants that might as well already be in love with me in the same way you are. Naruto continued. Kiyohime had a furrowed brow as she listened. She hadn't considered that as a possibility. And if I don't want to share? Kiyohime countered. Naruto sighed as he looked at her. Displeasure showed on her face. Kiyohime, I'm not saying that I'll leave you if another servant wants me, and I'm not looking for an excuse to screw multiple women. His words seemed to have a sort of calming effect on her. Perhaps it was the assurance of not losing him that caused this. But as I bond with multiple servants, I know that some will want to be more than friends, and seeing as how I've been deprived of the simplest forms of affection. Naruto trailed off, unsure of how to finish. The two walked in silence for a few minutes, Kiyohime thinking things over. Naruto had led them to the street where a ramen stand he frequented was stationed. He planned to pick up dinner here, then go home to eat it with Jack. I want your virginity and an actual engagement. Kiyohime suddenly stated, her lower face behind her fan. Naruto snapped his head towards her. She wanted what? Can you say that again? Naruto wasn't sure if he heard that right. I want your virginity and an actual engagement. Repeated Kiyohime with a tone that showed she wouldn't budge. If it comes to where you are with multiple women, then I want to be the first you are intimate with, and to be the first one you marry. Oh, so she wanted special privilege. That made sense. Of course, that doesn't mean I'll allow any woman outside the deck to be involved with you. Kiyohime expanded on her restrictions. Naruto raised a brow, but listened before responding. These normal women can leave as they please, but female servants are tied to you for survival. Kiyohime seemed to sadden as she spoke. If the situation were reserved, then I would want the first wife to be so kind to allow it. Naruto went over what she said mentally. So since servants are already bound to me anyway, you see it as unfair to deny one should they want to be in a relationship? Naruto wanted her to confirm that he had the right idea about what she meant. Kiyohime nodded with a sigh. I would rather not share, but if I must, then so be it. Love is something that cannot be denied. Naruto surprised Kiyohime when he grabbed her hand. Her face turned a light pink. I'm not saying that you'll have to share. For all I know, none of the other female servants would view me as relationship material. Naruto pointed out a very reasonable possibility. He just knew that there was a possibility of another female servant falling for him, and wanted there to be a plan in case it happened. That is true, Kiyohime agreed, her face still had pink dusting on her cheeks. Naruto nodded before they arrived at Ichiraku's ramen stand, and quickly ordered what he wanted to go. The questions asked by the owner and his daughter were something Naruto could do without. During the walk home, a comfortable silence remained between master and servant. Both ignored the odd gazes sent their way, save for when Kiyohime made the few villagers that dared to glare at Naruto in her presence turn away in fear with her own burning gaze. "Ah, welcome home, my master," excitedly greeted Mata Hari when Naruto and Kiyohime walked through the door. She stood up and held out her arms. The movement made her bounce. "I forgot you were still in my bed." Naruto recalled that he hadn't put her card back in the deck as he put the takeout on the kitchen table, then he called Jack out. The young servant watched with quiet excitement as Naruto took out 6 plastic containers that held ramen. He did genuinely like the dish, but not to the exaggerated degree he led everyone to believe. "Yep, I slept for a few more hours." Mata Hari began to describe her day. Naruto listened as he opened a container, and handed it to Jack after showing her how to use chopsticks. He also warned the assassin class that the food was hot. "When I woke up, I decided to clean your room." The shapely assassin gave Naruto a slightly disappointed look. "I was surprised not to find porn under your bed." Both Naruto and Kiyohime gave the 1-star flat looks. "You've seen my memories, you should know me better than anyone in this hellhole," Naruto told her while he handed her a container before he gave Kiyohime one. Everyone now at the table. The only male had to eat while standing since he only had 2 seats. Jack was in one, Kiyohime was given the other. "Even things I never wanted anyone to know." Naruto sighed internally as he ate. The servants knew the other reasons why he created the mask he had worn for the past 8 years. They had seen the event that convinced Naruto that these people weren't to be trusted, why he had no loyalty to this place. "True, but that doesn't mean we know everything about you," Mata Hari replied, her meal halfway done. "We only saw what was needed to live in this world, and pieces of events that shaped your personality." The seductress felt her mood drop, but she quickly brought it back up. "But all of us have our own issues, some more than others, so don't feel left out." Naruto nodded, his eyes went to the feasting Jack. That self-loathing feeling he had earlier came back. What happened to him was nothing compared to what some servants had to go through. Kiyohime gave a pleased sigh. Her dinner finished as was Jack's. The young girl yawned with sleepy eyes. Naruto decided that perhaps sleeping wasn't a bad idea, despite it only being 2 p.m. Naruto lifted the takeout box to his lips and gulped down the contents. "Alright Jack, I'd say it's time for a nap." Naruto signaled for his adopted daughter to come to him. The girl soon was next to him. She looked at him sleepily, and saw him crouch down and picked her up before he took her to his room, and removed the tattered cloak. "Tomorrow you're getting actual clothes," Naruto told Jack when he saw the black shorts that looked like underwear, and the stomach exposing, sleeveless shirt that had a cut in the middle of the chest area that she wore. She looked like an underage hooker, something he was disgusted to have seen before while living in the red light district. "Clothes, for us?" a surprised Jack repeated as she removed the bandages and glove from her small hands, then took off her boots. Naruto saw that she had no socks. Another item was added to the list. "Yeah, I'll get them after my test tomorrow," Naruto confirmed as he tucked her in. Jack's eyes closed, and light snores soon came from her. Naruto softly patted her head, which made her smile in her sleep. She had an image of innocence as she slept, one that belonged on a girl her age. Naruto walked out and shut the door quietly. The 2 females stared at him from the table. They both looked ready to start gushing. "What?" Naruto grunted as he took off the orange jacket and blue sandals before he sat on the worn couch he owned. The girls giggled and ignored the twitch in Naruto's eye. "You really are set on being a parent to her," Mata Hari commented on the way Naruto interacted with Jack. The blonde let a look of sad remembrance appear. "You know, I was kicked out of the orphanage when I was 5, and lived on the streets for 2 years before the Hokage found me. Her life parallels those years. I can't deny her wish for a parent." Mata Hari nodded with a sympathetic smile. Kiyohime also had a sad look, her eyes faced downwards. They saw a forlorn look in his eyes, and instantly knew that they brought up some bad memories. Those 2 years shaped my true personality, but it was one night that convinced me that I can't stay here, that there's no future for me in this village. Naruto stood up and walked to the counter. He opened the left cabinet under the sink and pulled out a kunai with a blade almost 2 feet long with a serrated edge on one side. He went to the table and placed it between the women. The sunlight reflected off the non-serrated edge. I kept this knife for the past 8 years to remind me how much the people here hate me. Naruto lowly stated with dull eyes. The three at the table kept their eyes on the blade. It was made to both saw and cut, to maim and kill. Naruto picked up the knife, but instead of returning it to its hiding place, he took off the headband he still wore, and placed both items along with the deck on the counter. That knife is a part of me. I took my first life when I was 7 with it. The drunk civilian had it made especially for me, but he was a coward and a big one at that. Naruto had both of their attention. They had seen bits and pieces of what he was telling them, so the two only knew the impact the event had on him, but not what actually happened. He drank so much that when he finally cornered me, he collapsed from intoxication, too much liquid encouragement. Defensive instinct took over and I slit his throat before stabbing into his head. Naruto had closed his eyes, the memory still fresh despite being years old. He could still smell the alcohol in the attacker's breath. He still saw the vivid crimson liquid flow from the wounds Naruto inflicted on him. I ran away the second I realized what I did, and didn't stop until I found myself in an abandoned building. That knife, Naruto indicated to the one on the counter. I still had it. I couldn't let it go. That knife made me feel for the first time I was in control of what was happening, and I couldn't just throw it away. Naruto saw the servants' eyes on him. They were surprised that he opened up to them about that, and Matahari was the one to ask why. You already know the effect, I might as well tell you the cause. Besides, Naruto gave them a slight smile. I know a majority of all your dark secrets and heartaches. Only fair you know mine. Naruto reasoned as he went to close the blinds and curtains to darken the interior. He then got a spare pillow and blanket out of the side closet near his room, and placed them on the couch. I've said what I needed, feel free to return to the deck or do whatever, but I'm going to sleep for a while. Naruto announced as he laid down, and put the blanket over his body, head on the pillow. The female servants looked at one another. Matahari indited to Naruto with her eyes, then pointed to herself, then Kiyohime with a questioning look. The berserker realized the assassin was asking, "You or me?" without words. Kiyohime nodded, and placed the folder that Zeltrech left on the table. It had been on her lap since they came back. Matahari winked at Kiyohime before she spoke out loud. I heard you say you'll get Jack clothes earlier. Mind if I help? Offered the busty woman. Naruto merely rose his hand with a thumb up, the gesture understood. She then returned to the deck in a bronze haze, leaving Naruto and Kiyohime the only ones awake. The teal-haired woman looked over to where her beloved laid, his body hidden by the blanket. She could feel that he had opened old wounds, and wanted to help bind them in a figurative sense. Kiyohime stood up, and removed her sandals. Her fan was left on the table. She blushed lightly, knowing what she about to do, but began to walk towards him despite the hesitation she felt. Kiyohime loosened her kimono in the chest area. The action exposed the bindings around her chest. She quietly undid the wrappings. Her CC cups bounced out to their full size. Her assets were held back by the yellow bra she wore underneath her chest bindings. Kiyohime bound her chest for 2 reasons. The first was to make her kimono fit smoothly, and the second was that she only wanted her lover to see her admittedly good-sized S. She wasn't in any way flat, but she did not have a mammoth bust. She was just larger than average. Put simply, Kiyohime couldn't suffocate Naruto with her S, but he could use them as firm pillow if he wanted. Naruto? Kiyohime softly called out to her master. She now stood next to the couch. Naruto had his eyes closed until the blanket was suddenly removed from his upper body, and his teal-haired dragon uttered his name with the softest of voices. A slightly irked sigh almost came from Naruto when he felt someone begin to place themselves on top of him. What is she? That thought ground to a halt when he opened his eyes, and saw a thoroughly flustered Kiyohime with her bra visible while she also straddled him. Naruto wasn't sure how to react to this. One moment he was trying to doze off, the next he had a blushing and surprisingly chesty Kiyohime on top of him. Thankfully, she started to talk. Her already soft voice somehow grew softer. You opened old wounds with what you told us. Kiyohime lifted the blanket up to her shoulders, then laid on top of Naruto, her larger-than-average bust pressed firmly against his chest, their faces mere inches apart. The close proximity combined with blanket over both of them caused a light blush to form on Naruto's cheeks. Kiyohime's forwardness yet again proved to be highly attractive to him, her delicate beauty enhanced by this quality. He felt a hand begin to stroke the hair on the back of his head while another caressed his left cheek with the gentlest touch. Kiyohime began to close the gap between them, her eyes partially lidded. "Let me ease your pain." When those words finished, Naruto felt soft lips against his, the feeling unlike any he had experienced before. Kiyohime felt one of Naruto's hand place itself on her right thigh, the other wrapped around her back, palm on the back of her neck as he pulled her closer. Both opened their mouths to allow the kiss to deepen, their eyes closed as whatever stress and tension that the day put on them melted away. Once again, Naruto woke feeling refreshed. This time, however, he knew what the warmth on top of him was. Slowly, the blonde cracked open his eyes, and saw the still sleeping Kiyohime's bare shoulders. "Must have slid her kimono off a little bit before we fell asleep." Naruto guessed mentally before he noticed that her arms were wrapped around his neck, and her forehead softly pressed against his left temple. He felt her hot breath on his cheek, and how tightly her body still pressed against his. The blanket no longer covered their heads, so he could see the small amount of sunlight that passed through his curtains. Wait, sunlight? The unofficial genin's eyebrows furrowed and he became perplexed as more of his mind woke up. Naruto may not have kept track of the time after he began making out with the teal-haired dragon girl that slept on top of him, but he was pretty sure that it should be evening by now. How long did they sleep? Naruto turned his head to face Kiyohime, and softly pressed his lips against hers in a chaste kiss, the response slow but it soon sped up when he moved their bodies so that he was on top. "Good morning, beloved," Kiyohime softly spoke after they separated, her yellow eyes shined with affection, and her cheeks pink from their position. "Morning, Kyo-chan," Naruto replied with a fond expression as he began to caress her cheek. She leaned into his touch, and grasped the hand he used. He may have only known the woman below him for a day, but she showed more care for him than anyone before in his entire life, so Naruto was completely fine with the sudden jump in their relationship. Kiyohime looked a bit disappointed when Naruto got up, but knew that they couldn't lay together forever. "Here," Naruto held out her bindings for her, but was surprised when she waved him off. "We are home, why should I restrict my body when it's just us?" Kiyohime asked as she stood up, and walked to the kitchen. "But Jack's here too." The draconic servant sighed as she opened the fridge and began to take out ingredients for breakfast, slightly annoyed at the lack of variety but knew that the blame lied with the bigots in this village. She spoke when Naruto joined her in the kitchen to get a glass of water. "Yes, but this is our home." Kiyohime emphasized the dual ownership, and turned to face him while he looked at her with his peripherals. "I see no reason to hide myself as long as outside individuals are not present." Naruto somewhat understood what she meant then. Basically, if there was nobody around, since Naruto still could hear Jack's snores, Kiyohime wouldn't bind her chest. In short, behind closed doors, Naruto got to see her unbound unless someone else was present. Not a bad deal. "What time is it?" Naruto questioned as he looked at the clock in his electric stove oven. "Hey, 9 o'clock. Undoubtedly, the two try-hards on his team were waiting for both him and their sensei, probably hungry from foolishly following advice that was counterproductive. Naruto took off his shirt, and threw it into his laundry hamper in the small laundry room that came with the apartment, then told Kiyohime he was going to shower. A blush formed when Kiyohime wondered what her husband looked like shirtless but decided against peeking. "If I do that then he'll miss the test," Kiyohime warned herself as she heard the shower head turn on. Since there wasn't much available, Kiyohime decided to repeat yesterday's breakfast, except she was going to put a touch of pepper on the eggs. She had used the majority of relatively higher quality ingredients that Naruto owned for his bento yesterday, and had been given the turkey leg as a free sample by a newly opened butcher shop while she walked the same path Naruto took as Leonidas forced him to run. She had actually come out after the first poke, and followed from there on. Naruto wasn't moving that fast given the weight on his back, so she was never too far behind. "I guess I'll have to go shopping to make a lunch for Naruto and his sensei." Kiyohime sighed with closed eyes. She remembered Naruto's plan from yesterday, and saw it as a good way to start paying back the pink weakling for her blatant disrespect towards Naruto. Of course, if Kiyohime had her way, Sakura would be a statue of ash. But I don't want to go shopping alone since someone may give me trouble for being with Naruto. Kiyohime focused on the problem at hand. Naruto was given enough money to buy a decent amount of food for 4 people that would last a week, but he was always overcharged, so he had to buy cheap to make it last. There was a possibility that someone would try to do the same to her, which would probably result in a torched shop. Not to mention a melted shop owner. I guess I'll ask if someone can go shopping with me. Kiyohime decided as she retrieved her bindings and began to rewrap her S. The dragon was keen on Naruto, and only Naruto, being allowed to see her without the bindings. It was his right as her husband and master. Kiyohime belonged to him, forever and always. What are you doing? Kiyohime turned around to see Jack staring at her sleepily from the doorway of Naruto's bedroom. The broken girl rubbed her eyes as she walked barefoot towards Kiyohime, hunger in her eyes as she saw the food that the taller female had been preparing for the past 5 minutes. I'm binding my chest to make my kimono fit better. The berserker had resumed her previous activity while keeping an eye on the eggs as they cooked on the pan. Kiyohime grew surprised when the Ripper intently observed her actions, watching as the horned woman wrapped a tan, gauze-like fabric around her chest. There, Kiyohime pulled the kimono back over her shoulders, and made sure that the cloth covered her bindings properly. Jack didn't understand the purpose of the teal-haired one's actions, but her attention went elsewhere when the sound of the shower ceased. After a few minutes, she saw the door open and with an excited cry of, "Mother," launched herself at the shirtless Naruto. The summoner was rather glad that he had a habit of leaving a pair of briefs and sweatpants in the bathroom to put on after a shower. Otherwise a very awkward situation might have happened if he just had a towel wrapped around his waist. "Morning, Jack." Naruto greeted the girl that hugged his legs, her face nuzzled into the fabric of his sweatpants. "How'd you sleep?" Naruto asked when she let go. He went into his room to get a pair of his regular clothes while Jack answered in a rather animated way. "Better than we ever have before." The girl's eyes sparkled as she remembered feeling the soft pillow under her head, and the warm blanket that covered her body last night. It was the best feeling ever. "Will we be sleeping there every night?" excitedly asked the childlike servant, her eyes still had that sparkle. Kiyohime silently froze. That was Naruto's. "Yeah, I prefer the couch anyway." Naruto confirmed when he came out, and patted Jack's head before he walked to the kitchen. He raised a brow when he saw Kiyohime slouched over with a rain cloud above her head. Naruto sighed internally. The reason for her mood was easily deduced, seeing as how since that was his room, that was supposed to be their bed. Naruto could tell that Kiyohime was deep into her funk, and an idea came to mind that appealed to his mischievous side. With the female servant distracted, Naruto silently crept up behind her, slowly put his mouth a small space away from her ear and blew softly into it. Kiyohime's face was scarlet as she jumped in surprise at the blonde's actions, and pouted at his amused grin. "That's not nice," mumbled the dragon girl as she tried to glare at him, but her blush just made it look cute. Naruto gently smiled as he placed his hands on the sides of her head and pulled Kiyohime into a kiss that, despite his successful attempt to get under her skin, she didn't fight. Kiyohime's eyes closed as Naruto took over the rest of her senses. His smell filled her draconically enhanced nostrils, her equally heightened hearing picked up his steady heartbeat, his touch numbed her skin, and he captivated her sense of taste. Kiyohime wished that she wasn't preparing breakfast so the kiss could last longer, but Naruto needed to eat, especially since he didn't eat dinner last night. After the short lip lock, Naruto left Kiyohime to her cooking, and grabbed both his headband and the knife near it. He then went to the couch, put the headband in his pocket, and held the knife in a reverse grip with the point towards the floor about a foot away from his suddenly intense gaze. This knife, for the past 8 years he had taken care of it, hidden it, and trained with it to where he was at least comfortable using it. He would wait for when a dagger user in the deck appeared and ask if they wouldn't mind giving him tips or to teach him a variant of their style. The weapon that was intended to kill me. How ironic that I will now use it for my own protection. Naruto shook his head before he removed the kunai holster on his left leg and cut the bottom inch off to fit his knife. Maybe he would name it, but not now. Kiyohime had finished breakfast, Jack already at the table. Once more, Naruto stood up as he ate. Naruto, may you summon a servant to go grocery shopping with me? We need food, Kiyohime requested after she swallowed some rice. Naruto simply nodded as he mentally asked around. A male voice volunteered, and Naruto told him to come out. As a bronze haze came out of the deck, Kiyohime quickly went to the counter where another plate of rice and eggs sat, brought it back to the table and placed it in front of the newcomer. He gave a quick thanks before he took the offered pair of chopsticks and began to eat. This new servant was a young man that stood at 5 foot 8 inches, possessed pale skin, short white hair, and light blue eyes that had intelligence along with a buried regret. A dark brown trench coat that had a high collar that went up to a little past his ears hid a majority of his body from view. The ends of the sleeves had a white design that looked like multiple rectangles lined evenly around the wrists. Another white design that was like a cross-inspired sword went down the middle of his coat, the rounded tip at the bottom with 2 points that extended out the main line horizontally, and had 2 more, shorter lines that extended vertically at halfway to the end of the horizontal extensions. At the top, the collar of a white shirt could be seen in the gap of the larger coat collar, and from that smaller collar, a reddish cloth was tied around his neck. Thank you for the meal. Charles-Henri Sanson, a 2-star assassin, showed his gratitude for the food Kiyohime provided him. Despite what his class suggested, Naruto knew that Sanson was actually the 4th head of a family of executioners that were also physicians. Kiyohime simply gave her fellow servant a smile in acknowledgement before she spoke to him. It is the least I can do since you offered to accompany me. It is more than enough. Sanson modestly replied, then turned to Naruto. Master, you need not to worry about these villagers. I will execute all of those that wronged you should the order be given. Sanson had rather strong feelings towards the highly unjust, cruel treatment Naruto had directed at him. It made the executioner remember how he was scorned for his occupation during his life. Thanks for the offer, but, for now at least, I'll have to pass. Naruto told the 3rd male servant he has seen. A nod was given in return and Sanson took everyone's plates then put them in the sink to be washed later. Kiyohime stood up and announced that she was ready to leave. Naruto gave her all the money in his wallet, which was then put in one Sanson's coat pockets. Kiyohime pecked her beloved on the cheek in farewell before she departed with her escort. The white-haired man assured that he would watch over Kiyohime then shut the door leaving Naruto alone with Jack. The blonde master recalled what he told Jack about clothes the day prior to this one, and figured that he would get an idea of what she would like. He also called out Mata Hari to get her input as well. The stripper, dancer sat down where Kiyohime previously had with her arms laid crossed on the table. So Jack, Naruto got the unstable servant's curious eyes on him with the questioning tone in his voice. He figured that he'd start with getting a cosmetic feature out of the way first. What colors do you like? Jack blinked in surprise, then put a hand under her chin as her eyes narrowed cutely in concentration. She thought for a few moments before she mumbled an answer, too shy, or too unsure to speak louder. Can you speak a little louder, Jackie? I really would like to know. Naruto requested kindly, walked over and began to pat her head softly, which made Jack blush at the affectionate contact. Naruto continued patting her head for a few seconds, then he stopped. I like blue? Jack began slowly, but gained a bit more confidence when Naruto and the barely clothed woman gave her patient smiles. And yellow, and orange. Jack for the ground more interesting to look at soon after she finished. Both Naruto and Mata Hari sighed internally. Her favorite colors were Naruto's eye, hair, and clothing colors respectively. Then again, given how she associated Naruto with safety and love, it made sense. The older woman decided to give an inquiry of her own. Hello Jack, my name is Mata Hari. The lower-starred assassin introduced herself kindly. Jack gave her cautious attention. Do you mind if I ask you what kind of clothes you would like to wear? Perhaps a jacket, a dress, or some shirts. Once more, Jack had to think, but this time her answer wasn't based on Naruto's outfit. I just want something warm. Something to keep the smoke out of my eyes and lungs. Both Naruto and Mata Hari saw Jack's eyes gain a traumatized gaze when she started to talk about smoke, but it faded when she finished. At least the older two now had an idea of to get her, but Naruto kept that look in Jack's eyes in the back of mind. Thanks Jack. Naruto gave the girl a few more head pats, her light blush returned and he told her to go to the couch. Upon her immediate obedience, Naruto picked up a remote from the counter and turned on the television to a channel that was focused on animals. Jack was captivated by what the screen displayed. The two older individuals looked at each other after Naruto sat down. "Well, we know that she would like a jacket." Naruto nodded in agreement with Matahari's statement. "A regular shirt and some pants would work with that." Naruto added, then spoke further. "She doesn't have socks, so we should get her a couple pairs with regular shoes." Okay. She also wanted something to keep smoke out of eyes and lungs. "Any ideas?" Matahari asked her master, unsure of anything other than a surgical mask. Naruto thought about that for a few minutes. "You think a scarf would keep smoke out of her lungs?" Naruto tilted his head as he asked the busty woman. She nodded in confirmation, her S bounced with the movement which made a light blush form on Naruto's cheeks. His gaze now stuck on the completely exposed top of Matahari's massive cleavage. The gaze was caught by the owner of the valley. Naruto stared at, and a teasing glint flashed in her eyes before a sultry expression overtook her features, and her eyes became half-lidded. "Master?" Naruto's ears didn't register the softer tone of Matahari's voice, but when she stood up Naruto snapped out of it. He looked up to Matahari giving a type of smile that he had never seen before. It was kind, but there was an unknown intent present. She then began to slowly step towards him with a sway in her hips. The curves of her lean body rose and fell with each moment. Naruto felt blood flood his cheeks as Matahari drew closer, unable to resist when she reached his seated body. The master felt his pants get tight when the beautiful dancer sat on his lap, her arms around his neck, inches from his face, and her warmth laid directly on top of his throbbing erection. "My master?" Naruto could barely lift his head to face Matahari, her expression one of longing and desire. Both emotions proven genuine by her eyes. Her luscious lips drew closer to his, gray eyes closed. "I want to, but…" Kiyohime. However, Naruto's promise to Kiyohime was known to the woman on top of him, so she switched her target to his forehead. Naruto felt her warm lips stay for a few moments, then they left as she tilted his head up further. "Not yet," she spoke teasingly as her womanhood grinded against Naruto's tented shaft. With a wink in her face set in a taunting expression, Matahari quickly got off, went to the couch and made sure that her butt jiggled as she walked. Naruto pouted at her, which resulted in another tease as she bent at the waist, her firm, round buttocks thrust out while she leaned on the couch's armrest. Naruto's pout deepened when she looked back at him sideways with a smirk, and shook her ass a little. That uneven skirt did not cover her undergarment. At all. This isn't right. Despite Naruto's raging erection that burned with desire for Matahari's body, Naruto was glad that his promise to Kiyohime wasn't in danger of being broken. Still, he could have done without being blue-balled, especially by her. "This is payback for yesterday morning, wasn't it?" With a sigh, Naruto stood up and went to the kitchen to get Matahari's rear out of his vision. Her giggle didn't help. It only made him want to hear it with a different tone. "Stop, I already promised Kiyohime that she'd be my first." Naruto reminded himself, or more specifically, his libido that had been awakened with a vengeance. Zeltrech wasn't just getting decked, Naruto would make sure to kick him in the balls. Grasping the handle on his fridge, Naruto pulled it open and grabbed a bottle of water, and began to chug it. Hopefully, his hard-on would go away soon. Naruto also hoped that Kiyohime would come back soon. The possessive dragon was the perfect deterrent to Matahari's teasing. Thankfully for Naruto, Matahari ceased to tease him after her latest success at getting a powerful reaction from him. The servant actually returned to the deck a few minutes after. Once Naruto had gotten his arousal under control, he left the kitchen and sat with Jack. The two viewed the program together. Apparently, this was during a yearly event shown on the channel called Shark Week, creatures that seemed to greatly interest Jack. It was 10:30 when Kiyohime came back, and Naruto could only hope that nobody was dead when he saw her expression. Her eyes were dangerously narrowed, and her lips were set in a deep scowl. Sansen, who looked scared for his life, walked in with multiple plastic bags, and set them on the kitchen counter while Kiyohime walked into Naruto's room. "What's got Kiyohime so upset?" Naruto asked Sansen when the other man stepped out of the kitchen to take his shoes off, and remove his coat, which he neatly folded and placed on back of one of Naruto's chairs. The executioner signaled for Naruto to follow him into the kitchen, and he did after he gave Jack a few more pats on the head. So what's Kiyohime's problem? Naruto asked when they both were in the kitchen, putting away groceries while they talked. Sanson sighed before answering. In addition to the store owners trying to get more out of us, Naruto rolled his eyes at that. Greedy bastards. Some girl with white eyes walked up to Kiyohime and started asking questions about her relationship with you. Naruto facepalmed as Sanson continued. Damn it, Hinata, you should have just left this alone. It was obvious that she was trying to fish for information. For what, I have no idea, but her inquiries nearly made Kiyohime release her noble phantasm. Naruto sighed. He decided to drop the Hinata issue for now, and focus on getting Kiyohime to calm down. Once the foodstuffs had been put away, Naruto went to the doorpost of his room, and saw that Kiyohime sat on the edge of his bed that faced away from the door, towards the window. The berserker class was quiet, and was repeatedly inhaling and exhaling in an effort to calm down. A good idea, but Naruto had a better one. He knocked on the wall to announce that there was someone entering the room. Kiyohime didn't outwardly show that she heard the sound, but Naruto knew that she sensed his presence. Hey, Naruto softly spoke when he seated himself next to the unhappy dragon, her hands laid on the blanket of the bed, and tightly grasped it. Kiyohime's eyes were open, pointed towards the wooden floorboards. They turned to Naruto when he sat down. Neither said anything, not that what Naruto was about to do needed words. He gently grabbed Kiyohime by her sides, pulled her on top of his lap before he wrapped an arm around the woman on him, and pulled her towards him. Both their eyes closed as their lips met. Kiyohime put her thin arms on Naruto's back. Her dainty hands gripped his jacket surprisingly tight as their kiss deepened. Kiyohime felt her master's hand on the right side of her face, the palm gently laid on her cheek. After about a minute the two separated. Better? Naruto asked with a soft smile. Kiyohime's light blush with a slight smile with shifted eyes were her answer. The servant's expression was just so adorable to Naruto that he pulled her in for another kiss that lasted a small amount longer than the previous. You're cute when you blush, Naruto commented after they separated. His words caused a bit more pink to appear on her visage. What would you like me to make for the bentos? Kiyohime asked as she somewhat regrettably removed herself from her beloved's lap. Naruto had his hands on the bed's edge as he answered, and made Kiyohime smile excitedly with anticipation. Surprise me, do whatever you want. He gave her free rein. Within the second after Naruto finished, the girl that had previously been in front of him disappeared, and the sound of the fridge being opened told him that Kiyohime was already in the kitchen. The teenage genin raised a brow after he looked back out of his room. E-rank agility wasn't something to look down on, given that it meant a servant moved faster than 10 humans at the peak of their potential. I doubt a jonin could keep up with her if she really wanted to move. Then again, Naruto wasn't sure if Zeltrech designed these cards to scale to this world, or the one that the meddling man was from. Maybe today's test would allow for that to be seen, but given how fast Leonidas moved the night Naruto got the deck, the former seemed to be the most likely. But Naruto also had to remember that he had no idea what the limits of humans were in Zeltrech's home dimension, so it could go either way. Pushing himself off the bed, Naruto walked back out. The smell of meat already was in the air. Jack still sat on the couch, but her gaze was directed towards the kitchen where she could see Kiyohime as she prepared the food. Naruto held in a few chuckles as he went to where his adopted daughter sat. Her lack of proper clothes for her lower body still bothered him, but he knew that issue would be settled today. Jack's attention immediately diverted to Naruto. She leaned against his side, and closed her green eyes in happiness when Mother wrapped his arms around her. Mom? Naruto looked down to see Jack staring up at him, a slight increase in her confidence from last time. He was pleased that she was getting used to him, but he still had to be careful with her. As innocent as she was, there was a chance that a few wrong actions or words could cause her murder switch to flip on. Yes, Jackie? Naruto smiled when he answered, and saw her eyes get brighter at the nickname. Can I get a shark? Naruto deadpanned internally. How is he going to handle this? Jackie, I don't have enough room in my apartment for a shark, let alone enough money to feed it. Naruto informed Jack. Her eyes dimmed, but she nodded in understanding before she looked back at the TV. Naruto tried hard not to grit his teeth. Damn it, he wasn't aggravated because he couldn't jack a shark, but at how the first time she asked to have something, he couldn't give it her. Naruto directed his gaze to the program just as a commercial played, themed to match the shark-centered, week-long event. It was some talk show-looking place that was unsurprisingly shark-themed, and in a chair across from some guy that was probably the host was a person in a cartoony shark costume. Naruto rolled his eyes as he wondered how much they paid whoever it was to stuff themselves in there. Stuff, shark costume, stuffed shark. Well, I think I might just have a solution. Naruto figured out a way to at least get Jack something that could pass for what she wanted. At least, until he actually had a place big enough and could afford an actual shark. Maybe he could ask Gil. You will find a way to procure finances for that yourself, mongrel. Gilgamesh firmly cut Naruto's thought off before he finished it. There was no way that he, the king of heroes, was going to pay for a setting large enough for a smelly fish that he would not own nor would he eat. I just wanted something to at least start the fund. It would make a little girl very happy. Naruto knew that Gilgamesh was cold, but he couldn't be. That is your child, not mine, but I will commend you for not assuming that I would so freely assist in paying for something that ludicrous, mongrel. That's just messed up, Naruto stated before he severed the mental channel, and decided not to bother the Golden Cane. He did make a note that there was the smallest trace of surprise in Gilgamesh's voice after Naruto told him that he merely wanted advice. Were his previous summoners that bad? Deciding that he was off track, Naruto looked back at the noticeably down Jack and tapped her arm with the hand that was wrapped around her body. She looked up at him curiously. I know that it's not the real thing, but when I go to get you new clothes, I can look for a toy shark. Will that be enough for now? Jack's eyes widened before she excitedly nodded positively, then returned to her previous position in a much better mood. Her lips formed a wide smile that was closed. Naruto glanced at Sanson from the corner of his eye. The male servant gave an approving nod, as if to say, nice save. For the way Naruto handled that. Naruto returned the nod, and went back to the show, the commercials over. Naruto raised himself, but that hardly counted as training on how to be a parent, and he still had yet to fully mature himself. Now, here he was, sitting down with an innocent girl that had a murder streak that clung to, and completely trusted him. Naruto knew that this wasn't going to be easy, far from it. Kiyohime would undoubtedly support him, but only him. Jack wasn't important to her, not in the way he was or close to it. Then again, Jack isn't a baby, so this can't that bad, right? Naruto thought uncertainty, unknowing that his musing was heard by the servants. Most felt pity, silently wishing Naruto the best. Others ignored it, while some felt a resolve to help in some way. Two servants in particular had thoughts of varying levels of interest in Naruto. A bit of a rebel but knows compassion, and doesn't care about one's past. I think that I may just have to meet him in person. Thought a certain caster in regards her new master. Naruto had an interesting mindset, one that piqued her curiosity. Another servant, this one also female, but of the berserker class, with her thoughts were more benevolent towards Naruto. My master, a child without a mother. A crime that I shall not let continue. It was 11:30 when Naruto left for the test. The bentos inside of a small backpack that he owned. The custom-made knife held in the kunai holster he modified earlier. Kiyohime had sent him away with a kiss. Jack returned to the deck while Sanson chose to go to a library and pick up a few books on the history of the elemental nations. Quite a few servants wanted those books to learn more about this world, and more specifically, the shinobi that populated it. Information like that was a priority. The more they knew, the better they could counter these warriors should there be individuals that might actually stand a chance against them. Primarily, they needed to know if there could be people that could stand up to the 5-star servants, but they highly doubted that was possible, especially with the likes of Gilgamesh, Iskander, Vlad III, and multiple others. And even if there were possible threats, their master had an eternal battery of chakra inside of him to fuel, and even bolster their already inhuman abilities. The primary concern of the servants was that they trained Naruto to an acceptable level of strength while also not making him a copy of any one of them. They would guide him on his path to greatness, but Naruto would be the one to forge his own legend. Master, are you positive that I should not be accompanying you to the training ground? Leonidas asked Naruto for the third time since he left his apartment not even 15 minutes ago. Yes, I don't want to draw attention to myself. Naruto repeated what he had told the Spartan the past 2 times. It was bad enough that it had already spread that Naruto had been deceiving the entire village with his mask of annoying optimism, and that he was engaged to a foreign woman, but there was an unexpected effect. Zeltrecht's story about Naruto's parents circulated around the village, and now a large portion of the cold stares that Naruto had forced himself to get used to had become guilty. However, a fair amount still gave the same cold stares as always. The way they looked at Naruto didn't matter anymore, it was his turn to glare coldly at them. To challenge those that still saw him as the fox, daring them to do something. Of course, none did, but all that mattered was that they knew Naruto was done taking their shit. From here on, the real Naruto would be seen, and the broken mask discarded. Permanently. However, that didn't mean that the blonde genin wanted people staring at him. His eye twitched when he noticed that some had turned their heads to keep him in view as he walked past them. Can something happen to take my mind off this? Growled Naruto internally. This was really annoying. He did not want to be the center of attention. The more relevant he was to the common folk, the faster someone would notice when Naruto finally decided to get out of here, and he needed as much of a delayed discovery as possible to put a lot of distance between him and Konoha. Well, someone figured it out. Naruto was startled until he realized that it was Kakashi's voice that suddenly spoke from behind him. I knew your advice was bull the moment it left your mouth. Naruto confirmed as he began to walk at his Jonin-sensei's side. Leonidas grumbled something in Greek that Naruto only could guess was about Kakashi since he heard the word Helid used. As for Kakashi, his opinion of Naruto rose when the orange-clad genin continued. Who wouldn't eat before what will likely be a physical test? And you didn't tell us it was required that we don't eat. Naruto looked at his sensei. That told me that it was our choice whether or not we should eat. Kakashi nodded with approval before he asked a question. And how did you know not to show up on time? You didn't care to show up when you supposed to yesterday, and judging from how you annoyed Sasuke and Sakura, you were trying to get under our skin. Kakashi grew more impressed as Naruto continued to show how he put the pieces together. Then comes back to not eating breakfast or we'll throw up. If the test actually did begin at 9 and was that bad, then you helped us, but what test could actually be that bad barring having to kill someone? It was then that I realized that it was another ploy to frustrate us. You planned on coming late again when we were starving, and more prone to acting without thinking. Naruto finished. Correct. Now, how did you know to leave when you did? Kakashi inquired. Naruto's response was so simple that Kakashi couldn't help but snicker. Honestly, since you came 3 hours late yesterday, I assumed that you'd do the same today. Naruto then gave his sensei a mischievous smirk. Since it'll be around lunchtime when we arrive, Naruto removed the backpack from its place and took out the 2 bentos Kiyohime had made for today. I figured that I'd have Kiyohime make another meal as a token of friendship. If Kakashi wasn't wearing his mask, Naruto would have seen a grin on the Jonin's face. If this team didn't pass, Kakashi was going to request Naruto as an apprentice. This kid not only saw the farce, he wanted to help make it worse. Naruto was Kakashi's kind of student. I think that I might actually enjoy this test. True to Naruto's prediction, his potential teammates not only looked pissed off, their eyes focused on the bentos in the 2's hands. Seems that they didn't eat tilde. You're late, Sakura screeched at both Naruto and Kakashi. No, I'm not. I came with sensei. Naruto retorted while he opened his bento. The smell of steamed chunks of horse steak seasoned with ginger, onion, and a small amount of wasabi powder to give the meat some spice flowed out into the air. Below the meat was steamed rice that had been sautéed in cilantro with a touch of garlic. Lastly were grilled vegetables, asparagus, broccoli, and carrots were among the present veggies. Kakashi had also opened his container that held the same contents. Sasuke stood up as his stomach grumbled loudly, and Sakura was quiet. The hunger they felt was present in their eyes. They looked away from the bentos when Kakashi confirmed Naruto's statement. Yes, I saw him on my way here and we both got sidetracked helping an old woman with her groceries, then had a rather interesting conversation that resulted in me receiving this fine-looking meal as a gift from his household. Kakashi then sat at the base of one of the nearby trees, a pair of chopsticks in his left hand. Since it would be an insult to Kiyohime, was it? Naruto nodded an affirmative when Kakashi turned to him. The man continued soon after. It would be an insult to Kiyohime's labor if I were to allow these bentos to go uneaten for any longer, so please wait as Naruto and I enjoy them. Kakashi's eyes smiled as he finished. Naruto sat a little distance away under the shade of the same tree. The two had begun to eat when Kakashi noticed Sasuke and Sakura quickly went to retrieve their own meals. That wouldn't do, not at all. They fell for the trick, they would suffer the consequences. Hey, I didn't say that you could eat. Kakashi called out to the other two genin. They turned their heads at him with unbelieving gazes. Why can't we eat but he can? Sakura angrily screeched, her arm outstretched, and she pointed a finger at the feasting Naruto that winked at them. Sasuke seethed internally, but kept silent when Kakashi started to explain, momentarily pausing from eating the delicious bento he held. Naruto is allowed to enjoy this food because he was the only one to realize that I didn't order you not to eat, it was merely a suggestion. But what about your warning about throwing up? Sakura demanded for an elaboration. That was just something I made up to give you a reason not to eat. Kakashi simply replied before he resumed feasting. Naruto was the only one to notice that he somehow was able to eat with his mask on. He made a note to ask if the Cyclops could tell how he did it. Was there a thin slit in the mask over his mouth or something? You lied to us. Sakura yelled accusingly. Yes, I did. The Jonin plainly admitted. Now, can I enjoy my lunch while you two watch? Think of it as the consequence for failing the first part of the test. Sasuke growled but sat down facing away from the eating Naruto and Kakashi. Sakura soon followed and they both struggled to ignore their growling stomachs while their sensei and blonde peer chatted as they ate. Kiyohime really is a good cook. Kakashi complimented after he swallowed a piece of horse meat. I'll tell her you thought so when I get back home. Naruto told the older male. After another mouthful, Kakashi asked his future student a question regarding his teal-haired, horned fiancé, though he spoke in a hushed voice. The Hokage had informed Kakashi about Naruto's deck, where and, more importantly, who gave him that deck. So, you're hooking up with a summon? More like she claimed me, but I'm not complaining. Kiyohime's an 18 to 22 on the 10 scale of hotness. Kakashi raised a brow. Not to judge only on her body. She binds her chest. Naruto calmly interjected, his sensei accepted the explanation. Kiyohime has CC cups. Naruto added, the Jonin gave a low whistle at that. For a woman of her body type that's a pretty good size. Naruto nodded in agreement. Kakashi then asked another question, hoping to get more information on that deck. How many summons do you have in there? Naruto hesitated before he answered. 300. And they're all like Kiyohime? No. Naruto began to correct the Jonin's assumption. They're ranked from 1 to 5 stars, 5 being the strongest. Kiyohime's a 3-star glass cannon. So she has a high damage output with low resilience? Yeah, Naruto confirmed, but his next words told Kakashi that they were done with this topic. Now, tell me about yourself because I have a 5-star that doesn't want this conversation to continue. Kakashi sighed, but took what he could. Perhaps it would be better to wait until he met one of these servants for himself. 300 cards in one deck, and they could communicate telepathically with Naruto. Definitely not a normal contract. How about you and I get some food after this? We'll talk more there. I'm fine with that as long as you're paying. Naruto agreed to the proposal. The two had finished their meals and got up. Kakashi announced that the test was about to begin. The previously eating males were glared at by Sasuke and Sakura as they all walked into a green field surrounded by thick walls of trees. Kakashi signaled for the untested genin to stop while he continued a few more steps then turned to face them. For your test to prove that you are truly ready to be genin, all you have to do is snatch one of these bells from me in 1 hour's time. Kakashi explained as he held out 2 small bells that jingled on the separate pieces of red string that they hung from. But sensei, there are only 2 bells. Sakura pointed out the obvious but relevant detail. Kakashi gave them another eye smile. Yes, the person that doesn't get a bell will be sent back to the academy. Kakashi kept his single eye smiling as he revealed that detail rather pleasantly. Despite the carefree tone in the Jonin's voice, all 3 teens instantly felt tension rise between them. Sasuke's eyes burned with a cold determination, he refused to go back. Sakura was shaking on the inside. All her work over the years and it was going to be decided within a single hour if she was ready? Nobody prepared her for something like this. While Sakura had an internal meltdown, Naruto had a mask of resolve to cover the confusion he actually felt. How is something like this allowed? Or was this another one of Kakashi's tricks? Is he playing or is this real? The untested teens didn't get to think about it for even a minute as Kakashi gave them a last-minute tip as he pulled out a timer from his pocket and set it for an hour. In order to get a bell, come at me with the intent to kill, or prepare to spend another year at the Shinobi Academy. Now, Kakashi saw the genin tense when he walked back around a meter away further with his hand on the button that would start the countdown. Begin. With speed proper of genin, all three of the hopeful graduates fled into the nearby forest, hidden among the bushes and overgrowth. Kakashi was pleased with their concealment skills. Of course, this level was expected from greenhorns, but they weren't going to get a bell by hiding, and the Jonin didn't feel like waiting for long. 5 minutes, then I'll give them some motivation. While the Cyclops stood in the middle of the field, Naruto had his back against the side of a tree that was on the left edge of the forest from behind the Jonin's perspective. The summoner would have spent this time planning on how to engage his possible sensei, but the 5-star that ended the talk with Kakashi had a few things to say. Insolent mongrel, not only did you foolishly reveal our numbers, you allowed them to know our ranking system, going so far as to provide information on one of us. Sharply scolded Gilgamesh, clearly displeased with that decision. A few other servants agreed with the Golden Archer, but they were nicer about it. That was an unwise decision. It is best to keep the amount of one's troops hidden unless the number is so massive that such knowledge would have better use in lowering enemy morale. Counseled Iskander, the king of conquerors and a 5-star rider. Naruto, contrary to what they thought, actually had a valid reason for sharing what he did. I understand your concerns, but I felt that it would have been best to give them something to make myself appear cooperative. Naruto heard Gilgamesh tell him to explain himself. Quickly. The deck is something completely unknown to them, and none of you existed in this world. Naturally they would want information on what they're dealing with, especially given that I'm the one who has it. Naruto paused when he heard Sakura's high-pitched scream. Kakashi was hunting them. Time to get to the point. If I had refused to share intel on my contract, then they would begin to closely observe me, which is the last thing any one of us want. Especially me, since if I'm being watched, whatever sensei I get will be ordered to keep a close eye on me, so my chances of running off without detection decrease drastically. Naruto heard the sounds of a fight of the side of the forest opposite to his. Sasuke now engaged the Jonin. He gave his final piece. He needed to move soon. Since I threw them a bone, their minds are at ease since my loyalty to them is intact, and they will likely view that I was cut off as either you're all weaker than they thought, or a summoning partner wants to keep details hidden. Naruto finished. Murmurs of agreement followed, and Iskander gave a pleased hum at Naruto's tactical thought process. Give the enemy true information as a decoy while keeping the truly important details hidden. The boy was thinking like a military leader. So it seems that you're not as foolish as I had assumed, mongrel. Gilgamesh told Naruto, but soon added. However, you now have put yourself in a position where if your true intent, or deception is discovered, you will be branded a possible traitor and will have to fight your way out. I don't need to mention how difficult that would be given your current. Gilgamesh chuckled mockingly before he finished with, strength. Naruto sighed, his position now further into the woods. He sat inside a tree's particularly thick canopy, his chakra signature concealed. He had learned that trick from the Hokage a year back. The old man used it to bribe Naruto into silence when the blonde saw him reading an orange book with a nosebleed. Bah, if he needs a quick exit, my chariot will provide escape. Iskander shouted, clearly envisioning the unavoidable high-speed pursuit. Naruto gave the rider class a mental thanks before he tried to find a good vantage point that hid him the most effectively while it simultaneously gave him the best view of the valley. It took him a few minutes to find what he was looking for. Okay, you're back where you started. Naruto observed Kakashi back in the middle with an open book in one of his hands. Naruto put his hand horizontally against his forehead, just above the eyes to block the sun's light so he could get a better view. He had to stop himself from groaning out loud when he saw that the book was orange. My possible sensei is a pervert. Naruto lamented. Did that old man plan this? He did, didn't he? Naruto suddenly saw a glint of metal flash from a tree in Kakashi's blind spot. Well, what do we have here? Someone thought they could pull a fast one on a Jonin? This ought to be good. Kakashi had to admit that he was pleased when he sensed not only Sakura on his right but that Sasuke had stationed himself on the left. Perhaps burying Sasuke up to his head ticked the Avenger off enough for him to be willing to work with someone to get the bells. So these two unknowingly had figured out the real purpose of his test, but whether they could work together remained to be seen. Now, where was the summoner? Naruto hasn't been seen at all, and it's been over 10 minutes. Kakashi wasn't sure if it was possible to predict what the crafty blonde was planning, or if he was simply biding his time. Maybe the orange wearer was waiting for the other two to distract him and take the bells for himself, or he wanted them to tire him out. Kakashi wouldn't be surprised given how much hostility there was between these three if Naruto waited while the other two were repeatedly beaten and humiliated. Sadistic but understandable, especially given that Naruto let himself be Sakura's punching bag for years. Oh, they're attacking. Absently realized the scarecrow as he used 2 fingers to catch a pair of shuriken thrown from the right. And here comes Sasuke. The Uchiha had channeled chakra to his legs to boost his speed and had leapt upwards using his momentum to deliver a flying kick to the back of Kakashi's head. Sasuke's leg had entered grabbing range, but when Sakura also began to charge at him, the Jonin waited until Sasuke's foot was a few inches from his head, and Sakura within 5 feet before he moved. Within a second, Kakashi spun around, his book tossed into the air in a straight line as he grabbed the unsuspecting Uchiha's leg with both hands, and continued to twirl to face the oblivious Sakura. Sasuke's body now was the Jonin's club, and he wanted a home run. I'ma beat a genin with another genin. With the momentum of both his and the Uchihas combined, Kakashi's strike sent the pink-haired genin flying into a tree while he let Sasuke go. The lessened inertia kept the human projectile in the air until he too hit a tree. After a few seconds, neither of the two showed movement, so Kakashi felt it safe to conclude they were out cold. With a single hand, the Jonin caught his falling book just as it passed his head, and turned right back to the page he left off. Naruto still hasn't decided to reveal himself. Either he really is trying to come up with a good plan, or he's too busy laughing his ass off. The second of the two proved to be true as Naruto, still unseen or detected, shook with silent laughter at the brilliant failure he had witnessed. He wished he had a video camera to record that. Okay Naruto, calm down before you give away your position. Naruto began to breathe in and out to control his excitement. Now, he knew that charging Kakashi was suicide, and while working together was a good idea, the chances of them being willing to work with him were 0. Especially given the possible penalty of being sent back to the academy if one does not get a bell. Naruto smirked. Too bad for Kakashi that he had 300 heroes to choose from with his deck. Who feels like stretching their legs? Naruto called out to his deck. Various voices volunteered. Iskander could be heard rather easily thanks to his commanding presence. The summoner had a contemplative expression as he thought it over. 5 stars were definitely out of the question, even though Naruto would have really liked to let Iskander out, but those were his trump cards. Leonidas still had a bone to pick with Kakashi, so Naruto knew that the Spartan had motivation. Decisions. The problem with having 300 heroes in one deck is that it's hard to pick who to use since you want to see them all. However, Naruto didn't get to decide as Kakashi's voice suddenly rang out. The servants also quieted to hear what was said. Hey Naruto, stop planning and start doing. The Jonin clearly wanted Naruto to come out, but Naruto knew better than to do so. Then Kakashi started to piss him off with what he said next. I know that you're being careful, but all your hiding is really starting to make you look like a coward. Naruto felt a pang of anger, but he beat it back. Now, back to. Then again, Kakashi cut his thought process off again. Now his words made Naruto grit his teeth. You've been hiding since you were what? 5? I thought your blow-up yesterday meant that you were done with hiding, or was that a backup persona that you prepared in case your first one failed? Okay, this just low. Commented a male lancer. The servants then noticed that Naruto had undone the clasp on the card case, and had put 2 fingers inside without thinking. Their heads whipped around to the source of a sudden roar that sounded in the middle of the silver-haired man's next taunt. Some of them gulped while others cringed. Gilgamesh simply smirked. Whenever a mongrel used that tactic, it always ended badly for them. This was just further evidence to why it's a bad idea to incense someone with access to an unknown power. That actually makes sense. Smart ones usually are cowards. Kakashi felt bad about using this tactic given that Naruto had extremely valid reasons for that mask, but this was a test of whether or not he could get a bell, and see where the Jonin needed to improve the blonde genin's ability. If Kakashi needed to use an underhand method to draw him out, so be it. He opened his mouth to shout again when every survival instinct the scarecrow possessed told him to move. Within half a second, Kakashi used the body replacement technique. A plume of smoke formed where he once stood just as the ground exploded at that position. Dirt and dust rose into the air and formed a smokescreen that obscured whatever had hit. Kakashi soon wished that he hadn't pushed that button on the blonde because when the haze cleared, Kakashi went on a brown alert, and wished he wore brown pants. I screwed up. Where the previously shouting man once stood was a crater, and inside of it was a person clad in black full body plate armor. An equally black mist shrouded much of the detail on his armor. It seemed to form from the surface of the metal. The only detail that was truly discernible was the red glow that illuminated from a thin slit in the metal helmet. The knight was crouched with his right gauntlet coated with dust and dirt. As the mist-obscured man began to stand, Kakashi noticed the overwhelming rage and insanity that came off the knight in large waves. The red glow of the visor jerked towards the Jonin. RRRRRAAAGGGGHHH. Kakashi dived out of the way just in time as the dark metal just barely scraped against his green flak jacket, and tore away much of the material. There was another impact that shook the ground, but the Cyclops' body flickered away when he hit the ground. His body turned to where the knight hit the earth, another crater created from his armored fist. Kakashi ripped off the ruined flak jacket, now only in his navy long-sleeved shirt, pants, and shinobi sandals. The knight silently rose out of the crater and turned his body around to face the alert Jonin. With a rage-filled roar, the knight suddenly bent down, and ripped a boulder-sized chunk of earth from the ground in front of him. What the hell? As the insane knight lifted the rock above his helmet with a single hand, its color transformed to a deep black that had a cracked red pattern throughout the entire structure. Kakashi wasn't allowed any time to dwell on it as the knight appeared right in front of him with an inhuman burst of speed. The boulder thrust forward like same kind of bludgeoning weapon. Kakashi sidestepped to avoid taking a full hit, but the blow once more glanced past him. The contact shredded his shirt and dug into his skin. However, unlike last time, the knight refused to allow the target to go away with only cosmetic damage. With an enraged scream, the knight swung the boulder in Kakashi's direction. Unable to maneuver out of the way, he took a devastating hit to the chest that knocked him across the field. Kakashi managed to catch himself despite the pain that erupted all over his torso. With heavy breaths, the Hitaki stood up. The knight stood in the same place, the chunk of earth somehow undamaged. What kind of a monster did Naruto send after me? From his place inside of a tree's canopy, Naruto watched with glee as the 4-star berserker Lancelot played with Kakashi. The summoner had been able to get the Black Knight to hold back, otherwise Kakashi would have been paced with the first hit. Strength A, Endurance A, Agility A+, Mana C, Luck B, and Noble Phantasm B. Naruto listed the ranks of the berserker's stats. The first 3 alone made Lancelot easily one of the most effective of the 4-star berserkers, but what made him unique was his Noble Phantasm, Knight of Honor. A knight does not die with empty hands. That ability allowed the insane Knight of the Lake to instantly make anything he touched into a weapon worthy of his legend, and he could use it with a mastery that was as if he had used that object as a weapon his entire life. Chopsticks could be used to block a sword, though only once, but that in itself was a terrifying example of the threat that skill possessed. Why did chopsticks blocking a sword come to mind? Momentarily wondered Naruto until he heard a roar from the servant that was quickly becoming one of his favorites. Previous thought forgotten, Naruto began to silently cackle to himself. No one calls Naruto Uzumaki a coward and gets away with it. As he happily watched Kakashi struggle to survive against Lancelot, a French servant grew increasingly concerned about Naruto. I need to help ensure the master doesn't go down a dark path. Worriedly stated Jeanne d'Arc, one of the only ruler-class servants, all of which were 5-star. She had been concerned about Naruto from the beginning. Her anxiety stemmed from viewing his memories. From what she saw, her master was at a crossroad that leaned towards a dark path if he was not shown a better one. That did not mean Jeanne wanted him to stay in Konoha, where all of his emotional trauma originated, but Naruto was at a point where a small push in the wrong direction could spell disaster. However, now would be an improper time to voice her concerns. Jean would wait for Naruto to fall asleep, then she would call him into his mindscape to say what she felt was needed. Despite his issues, Jean saw qualities in Naruto that not many possessed. His mercy and compassion for Jack spoke for both of those traits. He could do great things, but like all imperfect men, Naruto was capable of horrid deeds. It was her duty to guide him on a path worthy of praise, especially given the power he had access to not just with the deck, but with what resided within him. Naruto, call off the summon. Kakashi had been evading potentially fatal blows for the past 10 minutes while the knight furiously chased after him. Each strike came faster, the craters grew deeper, wider, and Kakashi soon realized that this thing was holding back a lot. After the clearly strengthened piece of earth clipped into his back, a thin trail of blood formed. Kakashi was done with being a mouse. Following the sound of the boulder impacting into the ground, Kakashi suddenly threw a smoke bomb, and silently body flickered away. He appeared a good 30 feet behind his crazed opponent. The enraged shouts and roars confirmed the knight's position. Eye visibly narrowed, Kakashi dug into his shuriken pouch and tossed out numerous handfuls. However, the sound of metal colliding with metal was absent. The smokescreen had faded considerably, and the red glow faced Kakashi's direction. Teeth grit, Kakashi reached into another pouch on his person and pulled out an explosive tag which he then attached to a kunai. The outline of the knight was visible through the smoke. The space directly under the black beast was Kakashi's target as he hurled the short knife to its mark. Survive that, Kakashi breathed out as the explosion from the tag thundered. The fire from it soon began to fade. The Jonin turned to where the two unconscious genin laid, and started to head towards them when his danger sense went into overdrive. Kakashi looked over his shoulder just in time for the opened palm of a black, mist-covered gauntlet to slam into his masked face, and knock him off his feet. What the hell is this thing? Kakashi mentally shouted as his body skidded across the ground. The weight of the armored man pressed down on Kakashi. Armored hand still grasped his face. The knight jumped off Kakashi's now thoroughly bruised body, flipped through the air and landed on both feet, legs spread apart with the knees bent. Kakashi forced his body to stop when he slammed his open hands on the ground, already channeling chakra to his limbs. The knight stood still as Kakashi walked towards him. The silver-haired man soon broke out into a full run. With a roar, Lancelot answered the challenge. The two met each other halfway. Lancelot threw a powerful left hook that Kakashi ducked under, and delivered a chakra-enhanced uppercut to his armored opponent's jaw. That move proved to do something when Lancelot was knocked off balance, but Kakashi felt as if his hand was broken. He could feel warm blood on his fingers. He had cut himself on the armor. Ignoring the pain, Kakashi moved to capitalize on the opening he had created, and swung his chakra-reinforced left leg into the knight's faceplate. Despite how the hit connected, Lancelot used the upwards motion to balance himself before he delivered a brutal roundhouse kick to Kakashi's chest, and sent the Jonin flying. It's like, I'm fighting a relentless guy. Kakashi thought as he maneuvered his body so that his feet hit the ground first while he channeled chakra his palm. This night, Naruto really hit the jackpot with these summons if the first one he's fought is pushing him this far. When Kakashi landed, his right hand was enveloped with crackling lightning. Eye focused directly on the Black Knight, Kakashi charged at Lancelot with high speeds as he shouted the name of his attack. Lightning Blade. In 2 seconds Kakashi was within a foot of Naruto's summon, his hand extended towards the left side of the chest plate, right where the heart was located. However, Kakashi made a critical error that he would instantly pay for. He underestimated his opponent's skill. Kakashi's eye widened in disbelief as the knight sidestepped away from his attack at the last moment, kneed him in the gut, then delivered 3 jabs in rapid succession to the chest before he crouched, and swept Kakashi's legs out from under him. The Cyclops was parallel to the ground around 2 or 3 feet above the air when he felt cold metal grip his throat. His lightning blade still active, Kakashi put everything he had into slamming his fist into the Lancelot's helm. The blow hit in the area of the left temple on the helmet, but before the jutsu could attempt to pierce the metal, Kakashi was swung in an upwards arc. Lightning-covered hand clawed at the helmet but found no grip. His throat was released in exchange for the wrist that was attached to the hand the jutsu was activated on. With bone-jarring force, Kakashi felt his body slam into the ground. The wind instantly left his lungs. A howl of anger and what Kakashi hoped was pain sounded from the night. The lighting did do something, but it wasn't enough to truly harm the knight in a way that helped Kakashi. Still, the distraction was enough for Kakashi to body flicker into the nearby forest, a very comfortable distance away from the enraged roars of Lancelot. With heavy breaths, Kakashi rested in the top of a tree as he began to use the small amount of medical jutsu he knew to patch himself up. That thing was a fucking tank. Even worse, it was an agile tank with skill. Skill. How can someone reduced to roars and growls be that coordinated? And the explosive tag did nothing. Nothing. Kakashi began to feel around his chest, checking for any broken bones or cracked ribs. Thankfully, he didn't feel any, but that would not remain true if he directly engaged the knight again. Especially with that unknown ability it had. That piece of the ground that it used as a weapon should have shattered after a few hits, but it lasted much longer with barely any damage, though the explosive tag seemed to get rid of it. Kakashi shook his head as he reached into a pouch and pulled out a few red pills before he lowered his mask. The solider pills were swallowed dry, and already Kakashi felt their effects temporarily energize him as he put his mask back up. It was time to get serious. Naruto, I really am going to enjoy torturing you with D-rank missions. There was no way Kakashi was failing this team. The other two showed teamwork, and Kakashi was not going to miss out watching his sensei's son grow into a fine shinobi. Kakashi knew about the BS parents that Zeltrech person made up. He found out about the summons when the Hokage briefed him about the deck. Kakashi gave a low chuckle as he reached for his headband. Those thoughts could be remembered later. Right now, Kakashi had to find himself a blonde summoner, and as he lifted his forehead protector to where it was straight, his left eye opened to show he had just the tool for it. Ready or not Naruto, there was still 15 minutes left in this test. Naruto had finally moved from his position. He now stood beside an unobscured Lancelot to examine the effects of the lightning jutsu Kakashi used. The many dents and scrapes that covered the armor of the Knight of the Lake spoke volumes of his ability to not only fight, but to survive. Well, at least we know that there's jutsu that hurts even servants. Naruto appraised as he examined the scorched parts of the helmet. The explosion didn't do much to Lancelot, but the lightning actually hurt the berserker. It wasn't anything debilitating, but there was burn damage from the heat of the lightning on the metal over Lancelot's head, specifically, the temple area where Kakashi hit him. The red glow of the visor brightened as a growl vibrated from the insane knight's throat. I know you're pissed, but you can't kill Kakashi. Naruto crossed his arms as he denied Lancelot's unspoken request. He was able to understand berserkers that were too insane to speak due to the mental connection he shared with them. Of course, that didn't make it any less weird that he could. There was another glow accompanied by an angry grunt. How am I protecting him? Naruto demanded with a furrowed brow. I sent you to shut him up in the first place. This time a growl was followed by the glow flickering. Okay. I'll buy you weapons after this, but don't expect anything too pricey. Naruto told his summon, a grunt of acknowledgement given in return. Naruto sighed. He already needed to buy clothes for Jack, and now he had to arm Lancelot. Granted, Naruto knew how important it was to arm him since that type of combat was where Lancelot excelled. Once more, the problem was money. Naruto was finally allowed in shinobi-only stores, so him being overcharged probably wouldn't be an issue, but he still couldn't afford anything fancy, probably just a kunai sword, maybe a low-quality katana. Then again, since Lancelot can turn anything into a badass weapon, quality only mattered if the berserker actually liked the weapon. Sane people already don't like it when their toys break, so Lancelot would be a nightmare to handle if one of his broke. Naruto cringed as he pictured Lancelot going on a rampage if his actual sword, Erendite, ever broke. Thankfully, seeing as how the previously Holy Blade was a noble phantasm, such an event was extraordinarily unlikely if not impossible. As Naruto turned towards the immobile Sasuke and Sakura, he slowly exhaled through his mouth, glad that they hadn't seen Lancelot, or his duel with Kakashi. If they were awake, then they might have gotten the bells that Naruto had in his pocket. The Jonin was too busy trying to survive against the Black Knight to notice that they were cut from his pants when Lancelot cut him with a sharp part of the boulder. The berserker had caught them as they fell. Naruto had received them when he went to the servant after Kakashi fled. Immediately placed in his pocket, Naruto knew that he had passed but felt uneasy. Now that his examination of the burnt part of Lancelot's helmet had concluded, and his thoughts regarding the night over, that uneasiness returned to Naruto. What was the missing piece? Naruto knew that the bells were really meant to divide them, but how could anyone pass if their team was incomplete? Naruto had always been told by the third that the teams always had 4 shinobi in a single cell. 3 genin, 1 jonin. What was Kakashi's endgame? What was the real point of this test? The bells were a distraction, but what was the true objective of this trial? Forget it. If it comes down to it, I'll just use Lancelot to make him pass us. Naruto decided. He soon heard a rather menacing chuckle rattle from Lancelot. Naruto shook his head. This guy sure did hold a grudge. Then again, Kakashi did burn a part of Lancelot's head when the lightning heated the metal. The material hadn't melted because of the amped durability it received from belonging to a servant by the Holy Grail, but that didn't mean. A sound of surprise came out of Naruto when Lancelot suddenly grabbed his arm and yanked the blonde to the left. Now directly behind the armor of the Berserk Knight, Naruto heard a few pings and saw kunai bounce off the battle-tested metal. Those sounds ceased when the mist returned. A kunai somehow caught by the shadowy substance and brought to Lancelot's hand. Knight of Honor automatically transformed it. Armed with a short knife, the berserker began to intercept the incoming kunai, now joined by volleys of shuriken with a single arm. The projectiles were either cleaved in half or captured by the mist. 3 kunai were now held between the fingers of Lancelot's stagnant hand before the knight started to use both arms. The berserker growled with a desire to hunt the jonin that was undoubtedly the one hurling the weapons, but his instinct demanded that he not leave his master's side. Frustrated, Lancelot growled but did not move. Despite being a berserker, none of the battlefield instinct, discipline, and most certainly not the skill he had honed his body to accept as second nature were affected by the madness enhancement that was the cause of his insanity. Kakashi huffed from the trees behind where the knight and Naruto stood. He had created a clone to bait the unusual summon away from Naruto, but for some reason, it wasn't working. What the hell is with this summon? Before it wouldn't give me room to breathe, now it's not moving an inch. Kakashi furiously gripped his hair, ready to tear some of it out. While they were indeed distracted, the hidden man knew that if he tried to get to Naruto, that knight would intervene, and he'd be back to running for his life. Visible eye twitching, Kakashi turned to his right and saw the unconscious body of Sasuke. With a smirk, Kakashi moved silently to the Uchiha, a plan formed in his head. Naruto stayed behind the protective armor of Lancelot. Quickly he realized that something was up when the berserker did not break away to go after Kakashi. Naruto bit his lip. Had he underestimated Kakashi? No, the Jonin's lightning technique pissed off Lancelot a lot more than it actually harmed him. Something else was amiss. Leonidas, I'd like to have my bodyguard back. Naruto requested, and heard a rumbling chuckle in return. Not even 3 seconds later, the Spartan king stood with his back towards Lancelot. The plume of his helmet was alight once more. Head over his shoulder, the lancer gave the other servant the green light to begin the hunt. Just throw him over here when you found him. I'm not above double-teaming an enemy. Lancelot charged in the direction of the slowing barrage, disappearing in the foliage, yet his roars were heard. There were the sounds of wood being shattered, then nothing for a few seconds before the loudest scream of rage came out of the forest. Leonidas whistled while Naruto shook his head with a smile full of pity. Kakashi really needs to stop pissing him off. Naruto stated as Lancelot stomped back to the other two. The mist obscured much of his posture, but the loud growl was the only proof needed for Naruto's claim. Not that anyone would disagree with him. So what happened? Naruto asked when the knight returned. Clearly aggravated grunts were the reply. You stabbed him and he turned into a cloud? Naruto translated. A positive nod was given. Probably just used smoke to cover his movement. Naruto rationalized since it was taught in the academy that some shinobi did do that when using the body flicker. This time a negative nod was given with a few hisses, and Lancelot held out one of his clawed gauntlets for the shorter master to examine. This time, Naruto understood when he saw that no blood dripped from the metallic tips. He communicated with both servants mentally in case Kakashi could somehow hear them if they spoke out loud. Leonidas, watch the rear, Naruto instructed. It seems that Kakashi has an advanced clone technique, one that apparently lets him create solid copies of himself. so I can cleave off the helot's head multiple times," Leonidas exclaimed with a hearty laugh as he got into position, shield forward, and spear held in downward thrusting position. Lancelot stood to the front, the kunai held between his fingers once more with his arms held in a position to intercept any projectiles. "As long as it's not the real one, then yes," Naruto clarified as he looked around. Eyes scanned the trees for any sign that Kakashi may be in or had been there. As Naruto searched, Leonidas saw the black-haired boy begin to stir. "What was his name again? It seems that one of your fellows is rousing from sleep." Naruto turned to where he saw Sasuke land after Kakashi used him as a club, and saw the Uchiha slowly pick himself up. Naruto softly touched the bells in his pocket in a way that didn't make them jingle as he considered giving Sasuke one of them. If Kakashi's BS about one of them being sent back to the academy was true, then while Naruto didn't like Sasuke, he sure as hell preferred him to Sakura. Still, Naruto knew better than to believe the words of someone that openly and causally admits to lying to his students. Not to mention someone that told them to do one thing, but wanted the exact opposite. Son of a bitch. Naruto felt it click, everything suddenly came together. It happened at a good time too. Sasuke had finally shook the cobwebs out of his head and began to head over. Naruto noticed that his coal-black eyes cautiously went to Lancelot before they quickly went to him with a narrowed expression. "Who is that? Remember when Iruka said I had summons? Well, meet servant Lancelot," Naruto answered before he signaled Sasuke to come closer to him with a hand. Eyebrow raised, the Uchiha walked over with slight curiosity on his stoic face. Once the other boy was within the space between Leonidas and Lancelot, Naruto began to share his realization with him. "Sasuke, this whole getting sent back to the academy thing is bull, it's just another one of Kakashi's games," Naruto told Sasuke. The dark-haired Uchiha gave him a skeptical stare. Naruto rolled his eyes but knew that if their roles were reversed, he would also be suspicious given the perceived stakes. Think about it. Naruto decided to appeal to Sasuke's logical, rational side by telling him the evidence that proved his point. First, Kakashi admits to lying about the reason why he didn't want us to eat. Second is how we were taught that every squad is comprised of 4 shinobi. How could that be the case if someone is always sent back? Where is the consistency? Naruto saw that Sasuke considered what he told him, and was drawing his own conclusions. Internally, Naruto was a tad surprised that that was all it took to get Sasuke to at least listen to him. Granted, there had been resistance, but it went away a bit too quickly. Then again, Sasuke tends to follow facts and reason based on logic. Maybe I'm getting through to that side of him, theorized Naruto as he silently palmed the bells again, care taken to prevent them from jingling. Sasuke eventually nodded and asked if Naruto knew what the real point of the test was then. "That is something I still don't know," admitted Naruto with a sideways shake of his head. Sasuke looked back at Sakura, who showed no signs of awakening. "Any idea what we should do with her?" Naruto shrugged. He really only cared about Sasuke being on his side. "She worships you. If she wakes up, just tell her that we figured out Kakashi's BS, and that we're working together as a team." Sasuke nodded as Naruto turned around. Leonidas had stood on guard patiently as the two talked. Lancelot did the same, yet the two kept their senses aware of their surroundings. The Spartan was impressed by the amount of skill Kakashi showed in stealth, but that was not what Leonidas wanted to see. If he wanted to see someone hide, then he would have asked one of the assassin-class servants to use their concealment skill to avoid detection. This was boring. Where is this helot? There's not much time left in this test. Leonidas cracked his neck while he pondered Kakashi's whereabouts. There was only a mere 7 minutes left in the assessment, enough time for one last fight. The Spartan tilted his head to the side. He saw Sakura still unmoving, then noticed a shape that he couldn't quite make out in a nearby bush. Despite how his helmet did limit his vision, Leonidas was able to identify the color of it. He smiled with anticipation as he mentally contacted Naruto. "Master, I believe that I found the helot. He seems to be hiding in that bush near the unconscious female." "Good, let's move over there under the guise that we're looking for him," Naruto recommended. Leonidas gave a mental affirmative. Naruto instructed Lancelot to take point when they moved past Sakura while he told Leonidas to take the rear. The servants silently acknowledged his orders. Now to inform Sasuke that they were moving. Hey, we should move, Naruto advised. Being out in the open isn't getting us anywhere. Maybe if we hide over there Kakashi will be moved and give us a chance to detect him. Naruto continued before he added, Lancelot beat him into exhaustion so there's a good chance he'll screw up and give himself away. Sasuke nodded as he walked by Naruto's side from a respectable distance. As they drew closer to the bush, Lancelot's irritation showed as he walked with his fists clenching and unclenching. The four passed Sakura, all tensed as they prepared for separate reasons. Once they reached the bush, Naruto was about to tell his servants to engage when cracks appeared in the ground all around Lancelot. In confusion, the knight looked down just as multiple dogs wearing Konoha headbands burst forth. Jaws locked around various parts of his body and quickly pulled the furiously roaring knight back down with them. What the fuck? Naruto shouted as he backed away to Leonidas, custom knife drawn and held in a reverse grip. The hell just happened? 1 minute Lancelot was there, the next he was pulled underground by ninja dogs. Equally confused as his master, Leonidas stabbed his spear at the bush and pulled out a human-sized object. That was a straw effigy wearing a blue shirt like the one Kakashi had underneath his flak jacket. Before Naruto could even begin to process what was going on, Sasuke's hand shot out and seized the wrist connected to the hand that Naruto held his unique knife in before he drew a regular kunai. He meant to put the blade at Naruto's throat, but a sound that he never expected to hear come from Naruto's pocket. The quick movements made the bells Naruto carried jingle. Sasuke froze for a quarter second after he heard the sound, something that Leonidas capitalized on. With a loud war cry, the Spartan twirled his spear to remove the fake Kakashi from it, spun around just as the imposter Sasuke snapped back into reality in time to dodge the spear that was thrust toward his skull. Abandoning Naruto, the pretender leapt backwards with a flip. His turned back gave Leonidas the perfect window. Just as his body corrected itself in order to land on his feet, the bronze shield of Leonidas painfully impacted into his stomach, bouncing off from the upwards angle it hit, and leaving a moderately deep cut. There was a puff of smoke as Kakashi landed on all fours before he put himself in a kneeling position, an arm wrapped around his bleeding lower torso. It wasn't a lethal hit, but it hurt like a bitch and would need some stitches. These fucking summons, Kakashi ground out as he glared in the direction of Leonidas and Naruto. The circular projectile that nailed Kakashi somehow ended up going right back to its owner, who stood in front of Naruto in a phalanx stance, the blonde completely shielded by both reinforced bronze and hardened flesh. Naruto's eyes widened with surprise when he noticed that one of Kakashi's eyes was red with black markings that lazily spun around that had black surrounding the red. That's the Sharingan. Naruto recognized the special eyes exclusive to Sasuke's clan. Or at least they were supposed to be. Looks like Kakashi had a few secrets of his own, said Jonin, forced himself to stand as he coughed. The beating Lancelot gave him combined with the unexpected hit by a flying disc had taken their toll, but he was far from done. I don't care. I'm passing this team just because of Naruto alone. Kakashi had made up his mind. Sasuke and Sakura had shown that they could work together and they'd be fools not to work with Naruto. His summons were just. Kakashi was cut off as a black armored hand punched out of the ground before Lancelot dragged himself and a majority of the dogs Kakashi called on to take the knight out from the earth. With a violent shake along with a few brutal punches, dogs were sent flying off the completely pissed off knight. Any of the canines that tried to latch back on received vicious backhands in response. Unfucking believable. Kakashi finished his previous thought before the interruption. The black mist faded from the armor. Its dented, ornate, war-tested black metal seemed to devour the light that shined on it. Both Naruto and Leonidas looked in alarm when a pitch-black sword appeared in the berserker's right hand. Its guard was curved up towards the tip of the sword with two chains wrapped it in an X in the middle. Erendite. Naruto slowly spoke the name of the blade that was the twin of Holy Sword Excalibur, wielded by another one of the servants, that one of the saber class. The summoner gulped. If Kakashi thought that Lancelot was bad before, whatever he did to call those dogs made him go all out. When the mist known as for someone's glory was sealed away, all of the berserker's stats increased by 1 rank. That increase in power was felt by everyone in the vicinity. Kakashi was clearly slack-jawed despite how his mask should have hidden that expression. By Kakashi. It was nice knowing ya. Naruto was not intervening. He may be the master, but that didn't mean jack to certain servants, and once a berserker was triggered, Naruto knew it was best to just take cover. However, it seemed that it was not Kakashi's time. Everyone's heads snapped to Kakashi's pocket where the loud beep of the alarm stowed there signaled the end of the hour. Kakashi let his body relax as he hid the Sharingan with his headband again. Alright, let's. Whatever the Jonin wanted to say was cut off by the vice that suddenly gripped his throat, threatening to crush his windpipe. Before Kakashi could react, he was on his back with the last thing he saw being a red glow before what felt like a metal foot quickly smashed into his face. After the irate berserker knocked out Kakashi, Naruto had Leonidas carry the knocked out Jonin to a set of 3 wooden posts planted in the earth a few feet apart from each other that were located near the test area. The Spartan placed the unconscious man against the middle post by his back. Naruto winced at Kakashi's battered state. Despite the mask covering the Cyclops' face, Naruto could see that his nose was flattened by Lancelot's single yet powerful stomp to his face, and wet spots that were probably from blood in the same area. Leonidas' shield left quite a nasty gash that was around a foot in length, maybe less. Undoubtedly, Kakashi had bruised ribs, his knuckles still bled a little from his punch to Lancelot's armor, and the leg he used to kick the front of the helmet was probably heavily bruised. Naruto knew for a fact that Kakashi's back was covered in numerous scratches and bruises from being dragged and slammed on the ground multiple times. All in all, the Jonin would be sore in the morning. Very sore. Lancelot is in the main hand now, Naruto stated as he turned around to look for the real Sasuke, Leonidas already in the middle of bringing Sakura back, the girl hefted over his broad shoulder. Lancelot simply stood a couple yards in front of the posts, his body faced towards the wood pegs. Naruto told Leonidas to help him look for Sasuke when they walked past each other. A nod was given in confirmation as the Spartan resumed his previous activity before he went to assist his summoner. It didn't take long for Sasuke to be found. His body was actually in some bushes near where Kakashi planted the decoy of himself. After carrying the Uchiha back where everyone else was located, Naruto placed Sasuke's body against the post on the left of Kakashi, Sakura already on the left. Once everyone was accounted for, Naruto mentally flipped through the list of heroes his deck contained as he searched for someone to patch up Kakashi. The search was paused when a particular card flashed by that Naruto went back to after a few seconds. Odd, why is she considered a berserker? The card that had caught the summoner's eye belonged to the servant known as Nightingale. The picture on the face of the card showed a pale, almost white-skinned woman with red eyes that had a rather sharp stare. Her hair was a shade of white nearly identical to her skin, and was styled in a long ponytail in the back, the bottom half lifted up to the level where the braid began. A black ribbon was used to keep the bottom from falling down. The woman's slim upper body was covered by a red, Western-styled military coat with gold buttons, and the bottom of the sleeves colored in black. White gloves covered her slightly outstretched hands, a black skirt of moderate length, and white stockings with buckled, upwardly pointed white boots that were slightly heeled finished her outfit. Naruto's eyes went down to where the skills were listed, the first one being Nurse of Steel. Now curious about this servant, Naruto called her out, the 5-star berserker soon in front of him. Nightingale had a calm, controlled expression, her gaze sharp and attentive. Naruto saw that she was only slightly shorter than himself, yet her presence dwarfed his. She was the first to speak, though Naruto gave her an odd look soon after she began to talk. Master, it is good that you have called upon me. I wish to speak with you about your hygienic standards. Can you hold off on that until later? Naruto requested as he turned his head towards Kakashi. I need you to patch someone up. Naruto chuckled sheepishly. Nightingale had followed his gaze to Kakashi, the reason for her being summoned understood. Lancelot and Leonidas kinda beat the crap out of the guy in the middle. With a nod, the new servant made her way to the unconscious man. 2 green rectangular bags with straps that crossed around her chest materialized underneath her shoulders. Once Nightingale drew close, she knelt down to Kakashi, and began to examine his injuries. Eyes narrowed, the nurse began to treat the gouge on the Jonin's lower torso. She took out a pair of scissors from one of the bags and cut away the fabric over the area. As she worked, Leonidas took the opportunity to begin another training session with Naruto. He tapped Naruto on the shoulder, and told him of his plans. Naruto hesitated for a few moments but nodded. He knew that this would improve him in the long run. Nightingale. Naruto called to the nurse that paused from her work, and turned her head to Naruto with a curious expression. Leonidas and I will be leaving for a training session. If any of them wake up, tell them I left. The servant nodded and asked if she could go to his home after she finished. Naruto nodded, and gave final instructions before he departed with the Lancer. Since I'm certainly not coming back here after whatever he has planned, Naruto jerked his head towards Leonidas, who silently cackled in agreement. Inform Kakashi you'll tell me if I passed, and let him know that if I don't, Lancelot will kick his ass. With that said, Naruto followed his physical trainer to another clear section. A decent distance away from they left Kakashi and the others. Once there, Leonidas told Naruto that he wanted him to do 50 push-ups followed by 50 pull-ups, but there was something he added that made Naruto groan. I want you to do these exercises with a boulder on your back. The Spartan held up a boulder eerily identical to the one he strapped to Naruto's back the previous day. Screw you. There is no way in hell I'm doing that. Naruto demanded for a different activity. One that didn't involve a boulder. Naruto still hadn't gotten over the run to the team assignments where Leonidas tied a friggin' chunk of rock to his back. Very well. If you do not wish to work out then we can spar. Naruto paled. Hell to the no. There was no way he was going to spar with someone who could probably kill him with a finger. Push-ups then pull-ups, right? Leonidas chuckled in slight victory as Naruto got into position. The genin's body was close to the ground as the stronger man tied the boulder to his back. The blonde struggled to lift himself up, his arms shaky while sweat broke out across his forehead. Leonidas had told Naruto to remove his jacket since it would only make him hotter, something that Naruto was thankful that he followed soon after he began. As Naruto fought to finish the first part of the workout, the Spartan took the time to practice his thrusts with his spear, and used a thick tree that he uprooted as a makeshift barbell for some light exercise. He finished 50 reps with the tree using one hand before Naruto could do 20 push-ups, then accomplished 50 more with other. Naruto just barely finished his 40th push-up. Perspiration soaked Naruto's body as he finally finished the final 10. He was rewarded with a 5-minute rest period and a bottle of water that he didn't bother asking where from in favor of gulping it down after the rock was removed from him. The short break ended far sooner than Naruto would have liked. His upper body cried for rest. Thankfully, Leonidas decided to change the second exercise to one that involved working his leg muscles. Unfortunately, it still involved a boulder with the addition of a rope. After he found a tree that had a suitable branch for what he intended, the heavily muscled man tied a tight knot around the irregularly shaped rock. Leonidas then threw the other end over a sturdy branch of a healthily large oak. Happy that he used a 30-foot rope that was provided by another servant, the Spartan tested the strength of the branch by pulling on the free end of the rope to lift the boulder up a few times. Quickly satisfied with the reliability of the branch, he signaled for Naruto to come over. Master, lay on your back with your legs straight and feet together. Once Naruto did as told, Leonidas tied the free end of the rope in between and around the blonde's legs. He also made sure that the knot he used wasn't too tight on Naruto's legs. With a final check on the stability of the rope, Leonidas gave his makeshift rig a single nod of approval before he told Naruto the next exercise. I want you to lift the boulder 50 times, only using your legs. Bring your knees to the chest to get the rock to move up. Instructed Leonidas as he walked to where Naruto's head lay. With one hand around his spear, the Spartan impaled his spear into the ground near Naruto's head, and requested that he grab onto the firmly planted weapon for a handhold. Naruto nodded with a grimace as he did what was asked and began to slowly start the workout, his leg muscles soon cursing him. Why did I agree to this shit? Naruto thought in between each movement, his lower body sore within the first set of 10. Once more, Naruto was drenched in sweat, his face red, and his veins popped from the activity. As Naruto struggled, Leonidas watched with his beefy arms crossed over his massive pecs. Honestly, I assumed that he wouldn't have made it a quarter way through the push-ups. The Spartan was pleased that he was proven wrong. He intended to drive Naruto to exhaustion so he could figure out his levels of strength and stamina under intense stress. This test indicated that the greenhorn was made of sterner stuff. Stuff Leonidas could work with. A sudden groan followed by the boulder hitting the ground told the low-level Lancer that his master had reached his limit in the middle of the 14th rep. Naruto panted heavily with closed eyes. His hands had left the spear, they now laid spread on the ground. Sweat poured off his spent body in fat drops, and his shirt now stuck to his skin. Leonidas shook his head in amusement while he retrieved his weapon, and removed the rope from Naruto's legs. There was a lack of response from Naruto at the touch, combined with his lowering pulse and slowed breathing showed that Naruto had fallen asleep. With another shake of his head, the male heroic spirit went to move Naruto into a shady area, but a golden haze came out of the deck and the servant materialized next to where Naruto stood. "If it is not too much trouble," began the new servant, her voice kind and mature. "I would like to watch over Naruto as he rests." Leonidas nodded an affirmative at the request. He didn't have any real reason to stay, and seeing as how Naruto was in good hands, the warrior king returned to the deck. Once alone, the female servant gently lifted Naruto off the grass, as if afraid to awaken her deeply sleeping master. She took him underneath a tree that gave plenty of shade from the sun, and got down on her knees after she laid Naruto back on the ground with his head resting on her thigh. Naruto unconsciously sighed at how soft the surface of what his laid on was, and got into a comfortable position on his side with his face towards her body. Her hand began to softly stroke his hair. The noticeable wetness of his blonde locks showed that Naruto really did push himself. "Such a hard worker," lightly praised the servant with a happy smile, her voice lowered to minimize the risk of awakening the mid-teen that laid on her lap. Her eyes shined with warmth as she gazed at Naruto. "Just rest on my Minamoto lap pillow, Naruto. You can trust mother to watch over you." Inside Naruto's mind, the servant Sankata Kintoki had facepalmed immediately after those words left her mouth. "Damn it, Chief Raiko. You haven't even talked with the new boss yet, and you've already claimed him." Kintoki shook his head rapidly. It was only a matter of time before he would have to run interference given how affectionate Raiko could potentially get with those she considered her children, a list Naruto's motherless life guaranteed him to be on. Well, isn't this golden? And just like that, Naruto's life was about to get even more complicated. He just had to wake up for it to begin. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.